We are paid, that's all. We are God.
Hey guys. Part 2 of this is what if Naruto woke up in a different Konoha. The day after a wild party to celebrate the end of the war against Madara, Naruto, the remaining Konoha 12, and some guests, can't help but wonder what happened last night as they wake up in a different Konoha. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 5. As the dust settled, Naruto gaped in horror at the damage sustained by his already messed up living room. He reached the wide breach, ignoring the Sharingan users that Sasuke was reducing to a bloody pulp, and saw the green-clad figure of his now very drunken friend run down the street below, now full of debris. Damn it, Lee! That was a new wall. He yelled, cupping his hands to his mouth. Screaming with a hangover was not a pleasant experience, and he doubted the taijutsu specialist could hear him, especially in his current state, but he needed to shout to someone about the property damage. He'd moved into the new apartment just yesterday. Behind him, he could hear Sasuke shaking one of the armored nin who'd attacked them, grabbing him by the collar and asking questions. About their freaky Sharingan eyes, about Madara, Orochimaru and someone else. Naruto didn't really listen too much to the Uchiha's rant because his voice felt like a drill passing through his skull. He shouldn't have started that drinking contest. Even if he'd won. From what he could remember. Sasuke, calm down, said Sakura, putting a hand on her former teammate's shoulder. He's unconscious. Actually, all of them are. You don't understand, Sakura. It's my clan's bloodline. Our pride and greatest treasure. Only those of Uchiha blood should have it. Oh, really? Then what about Kakashi? Sputtered Sasuke, that's different. I gave him my formal permission as clan head. Naruto was massaging his temples, trying to soothe the pain. He was going to turn back to his loud teammates and tell them to please shut up, didn't they have hangovers too? When he noticed something strange outside the new scenic window he'd just gained. You need a clan to be a clan head, Sasuke, muttered Sakura, who was passing her hand, glowing with healing chakra, over her forehead. Guys? Whispered Naruto, squinting his eyes as he inspected the road outside the breach. When did the light become so fucking bright? It's just a matter of time. I will restore my clan. Protested Sasuke. Guys? Repeated Naruto, a little louder. Sasuke, please, let's not talk about having kids when I'm sick. Lamented Karen, who was healing herself too. Guys! Screamed Naruto, turning to face them. He immediately regretted that. My poor head, at least I got their attention. What is it, dope? Asked Sasuke, wincing at the sudden movement of his head. In a stoic, totally Uchiha way. It seemed that even he was suffering the after effects of last night's revelry, now that he wasn't beating people up. He faced the outside view again, pointing with his thumb. Don't you think there's something strange about the village? After blinking at him for a couple of seconds, Sasuke joined him by the giant hole. We are under attack by someone who stole my bloodline and you're worried if there is something strange. He protested, but the more he looked, the more conviction his words lost. After a few seconds of pause, he spoke again. Some buildings are different. Concluded Naruto. Run jump kick pun crawl slider roll run jump dodge pre counter kick into face pun chinthi solar plexus jump in chin run stiope drop down sleep wake up roll rolled and pukta jakine dodge dog. A dodge punc run punk jump grab apple land roundhouse kikruni a tapple jump dyna micntr run through you wall head butt you punch fall down jtup yuthful. This train of thought was running through Lee's altered mind as he raced through Konoha, causing serious damage to ANBU, police force, simple nin who were just passing around, private property, some fruit stands and scaring the hell out of the poor bystanders. What is going on? Muttered Sakura. She and Karen had joined the others and were staring out at Konoha's skyline. Maybe it's a genjutsu. Suggested Karen, who was busy repairing the damage made by the alcohol to her boyfriend's head. Who cares? Let's think about the people who attacked us first. You know, the ones with the stolen Sharingan. Then we find the person who gave them my bloodline and I got him, said boyfriend who was barely holding back sighs of relief as the pain was fading. Or her, added Karen, ending the jutsu. Or her, conceded Sasuke. Another explosion echoed throughout the building. Naruto flinched in pain. "Oh right, they're still attacking us," said Sasuke. Seeing Naruto moan in pain, Sakura accosted him, already concentrating her chakra in her hands. "Here, let me." "No, Sakura-chan. Save your chakra," interrupted Naruto, patting his stomach. "Old fuzzball here will think about my migraine." "You mean hangover," smirked Sakura. "Yeah, that," said Naruto, becoming serious. "Karen, you're a censor. Where are the others? Were they attacked too?" "Give me a sec," said the redhead, concentrating. "The others are fine, but they're smashed too. And not because of the enemies." "Ah. I'm kinda glad I'm not the only one who's messed up." "Actually, I think you are the one with the worst hangover among us," responded Karen with a malicious grin. "Whatever," said Naruto, massaging his temples again. "Kurama was taking his sweet time to heal him, that's for sure. Let's split. Karen and Sakura, you heal our buddies, be sure they're able to fight. Me and Sasuke will think about the attackers." They nodded, and sped out of the partially ruined apartment. "And find Shikamaru," shouted Sasuke. To Naruto's consternation, he's a better strategist than the dope. "Damn it team, don't scream like that. My poor head. Shikamaru, wake up," screamed a familiar, feminine voice from somewhere just outside the room. The lazy Nara opened his left eye slowly, stubbornly refusing to open both of them, still clinging to the dubious hope that he could just go back to sleep. At least until the headache disappeared. "Troublesome woman, let me sleep. We have the whole day free," he murmured. "Shikamaru, I'm serious. Get up or I swear." The rest of her yell was lost in the uproar of an explosion. Shikamaru's eyes snapped open. Just then he heard the sound of fighting. "Temari!" he called as he jumped from under the sheets. He quickly searched for his weapon pouch, before remembering he didn't have it. Troublesome Ino and troublesome no weapons at a party rules. The fighting was now just outside the room. By the yelling he heard, Temari was still fine but fighting multiple opponents. He charged the unknown enemies, completely ignoring the clothes scattered around the futon. And that was how Shikamaru Nara went into battle, with only his undies on. Headache be damned. Hinata had never been so embarrassed in all her life. 5 men saw her naked. She couldn't help but feel anxious about what happened. After she'd knocked them out, blushing red the entire time, she just grabbed the bathrobe she had taken with her and left her clothes there, running away to tell the others what had happened. Then she heard the sound of fighting starting all over the building. Her training kicked in immediately, but she was still berating herself about going into a panic instead of collecting her belongings. Too late for that now anyway. She was advancing carefully, using her Byakugan. Her friends were scattered across almost every floor, engaged with the mysterious assailants. Concentrating, she could easily extend her vision radius outside the apartment complex. She could see various ANBU teams moving towards the building, which was good. If ANBU were arriving on the scene, the village was aware of the attack. Glancing up, she could see Kiba and Akamaru on the floor above her, holding back an entire squad of enemies. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but he seemed to enjoying himself. She could also see Shino, even more stories up, who was, sitting on the floor, massaging his temple. As his bugs swarmed a pair of unfortunate enemies. The Aburame seemed to not have even noticed them. Hinata's sweat dropped a little at that. "Where is Naruto-kun?" "We should split up too, Naruto," said Sasuke. "What? Why?" "Because that way we can cover more ground. These," he indicated the unconscious attackers with a motion of his head, "are small fries, Sharingan or not. We don't need to fight together to win. But still. Also, Lee already blew up your living room. Do you want Jugo to demolish the rest of this place when he gets mad?" "Please, Shinobi-san, refrain from doing that, you have no reason to attack me," said a tall, orange-haired young man in a placating tone. His clothes were bristled and still smoking from the unknown assailant's attack. "No reason. You people are attacking our village, asshole," yelled a little hypocrite Uchiha. "Actually, this is our village. And you attacked us first," tried to reason the younger man, showing his hands as a sign that he didn't want to fight. "Great fireball jutsu!" shouted the Uchiha policeman after he did the necessary hand seals. The peaceful man brought his arms up to shield his face from the blast. When the smoke dispersed, he was a little scorched, but otherwise fine. He was getting angry though. He didn't want to get angry. Sasuke would be disappointed. That Yamanaka girl would be disappointed. He didn't want her inside his head again. Happy thoughts, happy thoughts, happy thoughts, happy thoughts, it wasn't working. Please, he said, gritting his teeth, I asked you to stop doing that. Damn it. Take this. Fire dragon bullet. Once again flames erupted from the Uchiha's mouth and surrounded the young man's body. This time, he sustained quite a bit more damage. His body was covered in burns, especially his arms. His clothes were completely destroyed from the waist up, and some patches of his skin were turning gray. At that, the trigger-happy Uchiha stopped, watching his reluctant opponent with a puzzled look. I asked you, said the orange-haired man, his voice changing to, stop doing that. Yeah, that would be bad, conceded Naruto. Sasuke nodded before turning his back on the blonde and leaving the living room. Next time, I'll bring my sword. No matter what Ino says, called the Uchiha before disappearing down the hallway. Does that mean you'll come next time? Asked the blonde, not obtaining any answer. Either his friend hadn't heard him, or he'd ignored his question. Left alone, Naruto cracked his knuckles, eager for a fight. Come on, fuzzball, heal me up. My head is killing me. He waited for a few seconds before realizing that the pain was not subsiding. Hey, Kurama, what are you waiting for? I can barely walk straight. He waited some more, but for some reason he wasn't receiving response from the fox. Kurama? Hello? Are you there? He asked in a worried tone, poking the place where the seal was located with a finger. Silence. This is not good. Even if the village was in a state of full alert, life in one of the various Konoha's hot springs establishments was proceeding as normal, both inside and out. Jiraiya of the Sannin was perched above one of his favorite peeping spots. It was also one of his more exposed spots, but luckily for him, all the women inside the hot spring were civilians. Civilians never looked up. All shinobi regulars were somewhere in the village, probably patrolling or on call for whatever emergency that was disturbing this peaceful morning. Probably that explosion. It wasn't his problem. Unless Minato called for him, of course. Hopefully he wouldn't, since the Toad Sannin was observing a pair of magnificent specimens, notepad for his precious research in his hand. Maybe I could write an Ika novel set exclusively in a hot spring, or a spa. He started scribbling on the notepad without even looking at it. This was golden material for his research. He stopped when he felt a presence behind him. What do you want, kid? Scram. I'm busy, he said without even checking who was daring interrupt him. Jiraiya-sama. Your presence is required by Yandeme-sama, said a female voice he didn't recognize. Intrigued by this, Jiraiya turned his head a little, enough to see his interloper but maintaining his object of interest inside the corner of his vision. It was a young girl with the uniform of the military police force. He had never seen her before, but after all she was a little too young for his tastes. Her embarrassed expression was amusing, though. Maybe it was because she was stoically embarrassed. Must be an Uchiha thing. Anyway, it was clear she didn't like her assignment. Immediately, added the Uchiha girl. Is it really that important? I'm in the middle of something here, groaned Jiraiya, tapping the notepad with his brush to make a point. I was ordered to remind you that your duty, as a shinobi of Konoha, is to defend the village. And that defending the village is more important than your smut novels. Inwardly Jiraiya was laughing at the poor girl's tone. She was trying to maintain her professional demeanor, no matter what. He scribbled something about that for his next novel. It was a good trait to add to the character of the cold, beautiful maiden. Also, added the girl, your experience is required to not only contain the enemies, but to examine an unstable seal that was found on the scene as well. That caught Jiraiya's attention. Seemed a good reason for Minato to call for him. An unstable seal, you said? Asked the super pervert, completely serious. Yes, Jiraiya-sama, said the girl, who seemed to smirk a little at his sudden interest. The recon teams found a room-sized, unstable, shifting seal of unknown purpose. Yandeme-sama asks for your assistance on the matter. He has also asked for Uzumaki-san. Jiraiya sighed. That was indeed a serious matter. All right, girl, he said, rising from his peeping position. Lead the. He stopped when he noticed something out of the corner of his eyes. Some commotion between his beautiful specimens. What's happened? No way. No way. Not now, he thought, his jaw meeting the ground. Jiraiya-sama, please, we really have to go. Reminded the girl, covering her eyes. She was already moving away from the scene. With a pathetic whimper, Jiraiya abandoned his peeping post and started to follow the Uchiha, snapping the brush trapped in his grip in barely repressed rage. Real-life hot springs girl-on-girl action, and I'm missing it. I'm going to murder the one responsible. Whoever he is. In his empty, with the exception of the unconscious intruders, apartment, Naruto sneezed. Hinata was running up the stairway. Her plan was to find the most of her peers she could, thanks to her Byakugan, and regroup to form a strategy. She was almost to the 4th floor, where most of them were, fighting intruders, dealing with their hangovers or both. Even Hinata's head was pounding a little. She could see all that was happening in the building. It was a little strange because, thanks to her bloodline, she was watching from above the people on the lower levels and from below the ones above her, at the same time. She could see Sakura, who was healing Choji and Sai, probably reducing the hangover symptoms. Karen was doing the same to Suigetsu. Before starting an argument about Kami knows what, Sasuke was descending another stairway, with a strange smirk on his face. She could also see Shikamaru and Temari holding off a team of intruders, both of them battling the enemy wearing only underwear. The bottom underwear. That sight made her blush a little. Naruto-kun was standing in the middle of his empty apartment, his eyes gazing at nothing and seemed worried about something. What happened? Kiba, Akamaru and Shino were back together and, her eyes widened when she saw 2 shuriken fly from behind her, directed at her head. She rolled forward reflexively, hearing the sharp weapons cut the air above her. Who threw those? She thought as she used the roll flip herself up and facing her attacker. There is no one. The dash. There was someone. Right behind her, no more than 10 meters away, a single ANBU was sticking to the wall, his arms still extended from throwing the weapons. Hinata couldn't explain the man's presence. The Byakugan granted the user a 360 degrees field of vision. It could see the body's chakra pathways, and even see through solid objects. If focused, the user could extend their sight to great distances. So how was it possible? No wait. Why would an ANBU attack me? His attacker didn't seem to be a normal ANBU, now that Hinata was giving him a closer look. Under the standard armor, he was wearing a long-sleeved, dull gray suit. No sword could be seen on his figure. His hair was also completely hidden by the mask he wore, that reached his nape and sported the face of a snake. This was no Konoha ANBU, decided Hinata. After Orochimaru's betrayal, snakes were frowned upon in Konoha, just like foxes after the Kyuubi attack. So, you really do have the Byakugan, spoke the snake face just a second before Hinata could. His voice seemed muffled by the integral mask, but you don't have the seal on your forehead. The not ANBU lowered his arms slowly and let himself fall to the floor. At the sudden movement, Hinata stepped back, changing her guard accordingly to the adversary's new posture. You have the Byakugan. You are in a gentle fist form, or a variant of it. Who are you? Asked the snake face, rising to a stand. I should be asking that. Said firmly Hinata. Who are you? Are you part of the attack on us? And how did you hide from my Byakugan? The fake ANBU tilted his head before speaking again. There are ways around it, of course. What is your name? Hinata Hyuga, she replied, a little confused. Why would this strange attacker ask her name? He seemed to be familiar with the Hyuga. He was even able to conceal his presence from the Byakugan. Just that made him a threat to not only Konoha, but to her whole clan. So how could he not know the heiress' name? The snake mask paused before talking again. There is no Hinata in the Hyuga clan. What? Murmured the Hyuga heiress, before she was interrupted by the snake. Enough. You have the bloodline, but we don't know where are you from. You will tell us, no matter what. After saying that, the fake ANBU shifted his pose, assuming a battle stance that made Hinata's eyes widen even more. It was a Juken form to counter her own. A very, very advanced one. The theory was good. Unprecedented, difficult to demonstrate, sure, but it had valid points. Bloodline transplant wasn't something unheard of, it was just incredibly rare. Mostly because there were very few bloodlines that could actually be physically transplanted, and if it happened, usually the clan demanded the head of the shinobi or civilian who received the transplant. Funny how usually the person who performed the transplant, or the reason, was rarely mentioned. He remembered the rabid rage of the Uchiha, when the Yandame's apprentice obtained his Sharingan. Tsukumo's son, Kakashi, was it? Back in the day the Sharingan scandal had caused quite a political shitstorm. But there had been a war going on, and no time for such ridiculous squabbling. After the war, Kakashi had been considered a war hero, the Sharingan I was donated spontaneously by the dying Obito. Minato was chosen as the Yondaime, a still sore wound for him, making his student more or less untouchable and, as such, the bloodline theft issue was dropped. Dropped, but not forgotten. Too bad for the death of young Rin. She had been able to perfectly transplant an Uchiha eye, in the field with little or no equipment at all. He would have loved to talk to her about it. Tsunade probably would have loved to teach such a talented medic. Too bad the slug Sannin was roaming the lands in her self-imposed exile. He brushed off those thoughts and got back to work. Instead of simply transplanting the bloodline, he was more interested in the possibility of infusing a, hopefully, willing subject with it, partially rewriting his or her genetic code permanently. Unlike a simple transplant, such change would potentially pass the bloodline to any descendant of the subject. The potential was enormous. Resurrecting dying bloodlines, either lost or on the brink of extinction, was only the tip of the iceberg. There was also the possibility to combine bloodlines in a new bloodline altogether, or modifying an already existing one to make it more stable, or stronger. He started scribbling some notes about the means necessary for such a buzzing sound interrupted his musings. Someone had pressed the doorbell situated outside of his house-turned-lab. Or was it lab-turned-house? He couldn't remember. Enko-chan. The door, he called, before going back to writing. The test subject would have to be young. More than one, to increase the odds of a successful experiment. Very young, long before their bodies started to develop, to increase the chances for the new genetic material to be accepted. And speaking of genetic material, what bloodline should he concentrate his efforts on? He started making a short list of the bloodlines he knew about. Which turned out to be not so short after all. But he immediately crossed out the Sharingan and the Byakugan, both associated with powerful, prominent and numerous clans. His dabbling with bloodlines was already dangerous as it was without. The bell buzzed again. Anko! Didn't you open the door? He yelled, disturbed by this interruption. The bell started buzzing non-stop. The little shit, whoever it was actually keeping the button pressed. He left his desk, knowing that working on his research like this would be unbearable. Walking towards the entrance hall, he saw his young apprentice sprawled on a couch, sleeping and snoring theatrically surrounded by leftovers of takeaway dango. He almost found it cute. Almost. A shinobi should not have slept through the ringing doorbell. He opened the door to find an Uchiha in front of it. Impossible, did they know of his interest in the bloodlines already? He hadn't even started his work. Orochimaru-sama, the Hokage requires your assistance. The village is under attack, stated the Uchiha before he could ask for an explanation. Great. Just great. He had to interrupt his work for this. I swear, I will murder the one responsible. And then use his corpse in my experiments. Naruto sneezed again. Great. Not only is my head killing me, and Kurama isn't talking, I've got a cold too. Kakashi was annoyed. More than annoyed, actually. If he could choose, he would have chosen to go storming the mysterious building with all the other shinobi. Instead, he was doing patrol duty. He could cope with that. What he couldn't cope with were his, luckily temporary, teammates. Guy had failed quite quickly at his self-imposed challenge of being less loud, to avoid scaring the civilians, and no matter how strongly he protested, or told him it was unnecessary, the green-clad boy insisted on walking on his hands. Asuma and Kurenai were still stuck at the same point as always. First, the staring. Then, trying to work up the courage to talk to the other about serious matters, only to chicken out and fail spectacularly, asking stupid questions or talking about idiotic topics instead. Right now, they were talking about the weather, of all things. Further down the road, Kakashi could see a squad of genin escorting the civilians to the closest refuge. Kakashi almost envied them. Dealing with civilians was probably better than dealing with all this emotional crap. And a green lunatic. Team, what's the name of your team again? Asked a voice on the radio, on their private channel. Hearing that, all the team turned serious. Even Guy, still walking with his arms. Kakashi here. We don't have a team designation. If we do, nobody informed us. Alright, Team Kakashi. Masahiro has detected one of the intruders. He just passed through the safety perimeter like it was nothing, and is moving to your position. Understood. From what direction? Just as he asked that, he heard the sound of fighting and they could see a cloud of dust rising down the street. Never mind. Moving to intercept, he said before he could receive a now superfluous response. He moved. The now named Team Kakashi, meh, what a ridiculous name, prepared for battle as they approached the chaos caused by their enemy. Guiding his team toward the direction of the enemy, Kakashi grabbed a kunai. Asuma unsheathed his trench knives. Kurenai started doing the hand signs for a genjutsu. She seemed to be quite talented in that field, Kakashi had to recognize. He was glad that the two were able to get their heads in the game. This single shinobi could be serious trouble if he had been able to pass the security perimeter without issue. They had to take this fight seriously. Of course, Guy instead was still walking, well, running, on his hands. Guy, groaned Kakashi, please. Nonsense, my eternal rival. I shall defeat this enemy without touching the terrain with my feet, otherwise I will. Kakashi didn't hear what Guy would do if his feet touched the street, because without any warning the wall of one of the houses they were running along collapsed, and with a jump, a figure landed a few meters in front of them, moving like it could barely stand on its feet. It was green. Team Kakashi stopped. It had a bowl haircut. Kakashi's eye widened. He was dressed with a green jumpsuit, matching the one worn by Guy. He was also wearing a flak vest, like those used by Konoha forces. He seemed to not have noticed them yet, and was murmuring something about unyouthful walls. Kami, there are two of him, was Kakashi's first thought. Of course that was impossible, but he breathed a sigh of relief all the same. The thought of two people like Guy existing was terrible indeed. It seemed that the enemy had tried to infiltrate the village after all, but his disguise wasn't perfect. For starter, the intruder was too tall. His face was also different. And his mannerisms. He seemed to notice them, wobbling on his place and squinting his eyes. He darted towards them with unbelievable speed and stopped just in front of Guy. He was moving like he was drunk. That was another thing that didn't match. The intruder just stood there, watching Guy for a few moments before lowering his eyes to Guy's eye level, which was quite low since the boy was balanced on his hands. The fake Guy didn't seem to notice that Kakashi, Asuma and Kurenai had surrounded him, ready to attack. Why you dressed like Aai sensei? Slurred the intruder. Maybe he really was drunk. Or a really good actor. Just as Kakashi was ready to move in and stab him and get it over with, Guy shouted, "You! I know your plan." Such unyouthful behavior. That caused the intruder to stumble back, dodging Kakashi's attack and rising on his unsafe feet. Kakashi swore. Guy's timing couldn't have been any worse than, "You dressed like me to make everyone believe you're me," said Guy. Well, at least he got that part, thought Kakashi, who had shifted back to the formation around the enemy. He gestured to Azuma, to attack him simultaneously, "And then you got drunk, to ruin my reputation," yelled the green-clad, Konoha's green-clad shinobi, pointing an accusatory finger at the imposter, who actually stumbled back with a confused expression. Everybody stood still, paralyzed in shock. Kakashi didn't know what was more idiotic, Guy's reasoning or the fact that he was standing on a single hand in front of an enemy who looked almost like his long-lost brother. The intruder pouted at the accusation. "How dare you say Yurima sensei? That SSS unyouthful and unforgivable," he said, pointing a finger of his own. At that, Guy flipped back and landed on his feet, his self-imposed challenge completely forgotten. "Stop imitating me. That's unyouthful. Stop imitating ma sensei," yelled the intruder. "I'm sorry then, but I'm forced to fight you," said Guy with a resolute tone, assuming the basic form of his fighting style. Well, at least he got the fighting part right, thought Kakashi. Seeing that the nine-tailed fuzzball was silent for some reason, Naruto decided that he was wasting time just standing there shouting mentally at him. Better check on the invaders. He could fight with a headache. And a little of nausea. Alright, a lot of nausea, but he had fought with an hole in his torso before. More than once. He could bear this for a little while. If only there was less fucking noise. He was leaving the room, when he noticed the still unconscious enemies. He couldn't really leave them here, after all. Naruto started to search their belongings and took all the weapons and ninja equipment he could, putting a weapon pouch on his short pants. It was strange. Looking at the enemies, he had a sense of déjà vu. Maybe it was their armor. It reminded him a little of the one Madara had, just lighter and less bulky. Yeah, that was probably the reason. Then he noticed the symbol on their sleeves. It was an Uchiha fan, in the middle of a shuriken star. He paused. Why would the enemies have the Uchiha symbol on them? They were lucky that Sasuke was too angry about the stolen eyes. Had he noticed the crest, he would have killed them with his bare hands, Naruto was sure of it. But he was sure to have already seen that symbol somewhere. A memory he couldn't really place, and the headache wasn't helping. Something, from when he was a child, maybe. Nah, that was impossible. He dropped that train of thought when he heard the sound of a kunai impacting with the wooden wall a short distance from him. He jumped up, ready for a fight. Normally he would have expected an enemy attack, but then his eyes fell on the kunai protruding from the wall. Forgetting that someone just threw the deadly weapon through the hole in the room, he slowly grabbed it, completely mesmerized by it. It was a three-pronged kunai. Like those used by, there was a golden flash and he felt a strong hand close on his own, that was tight around the weapon's handle. He raised his gaze. 2 pairs of blue eyes met and widened, for different reasons. Chapter 6. A gargantuan figure stirred in the dim darkness, slowly waking up. It was tired, and cold and weak. All things that it hated feeling. He slowly opened his red eyes, groaning from the aches that ran throughout his whole body. He blinked at the first thing he noticed when he took a look around his humble abode, the seal placed on his vessel's gut. It was a bottle. A giant bottle, almost as big as he was without counting his tails. On the flank of the bottle was a giant label that just said sake. Ha! Weird. He pushed it a little, testing to see if it still had any in it. No such luck, it was empty. Too bad, he could have used a little booze right then. Maybe the fact that the bottle was empty explained the headache. Was this what those meat sacks called having a hangover? Damn, he was really weak. He already felt his consciousness fading to the need for sleep. He felt like he had spent all his chakra all at once. It would take days, or weeks of rest to come back to full strength. What happened? He tried to remember, but the events before he was knocked out were all confused, mixed together. He remembered a party thrown in his vessel's honor, and, oh no. No. As many tails as he had, no. Naruto, what have you done? He murmured before falling again into his deep slumber. The 2 blondes just stared at each other, not daring to move. Minato examined the intruder in front of him. It was probably the worst disguise ever attempted. For starters, they clearly chose the Hokage, Minato himself. A well-known figure in the village. Not really a smart choice. Then they got the face all wrong. Sure, it was similar, somehow, but the skin tone was wrong, and also the chin and the cheekbones. And what were those marks on the face? Also, he was shorter than Minato. That actually offended the yondaime. Whoever created the disguise either didn't have enough information or was very incapable at their job. Also, his clothes, he looked like he just got out of bed. And Minato would have never let himself get caught wearing orange boxers. Am I still drunk? Asked the badly disguised fake Minato in a hesitant tone, never looking away from him. What kind of infiltrator got drunk during a mission? Well, that explains the bags under his bloodshot eyes, thought Minato. Enough with the staring contest. Minato gripped his not very good doppelganger's wrist with his free hand and twisted it hard. The man yelped in surprise and let go of the yondaime's kunai. No, boy, not man. He looked so young, maybe 10 years younger than Minato. The kunai fell. Minato grabbed it with a swoop of his left hand. The imposter staggered back, trying to free his trapped hand. The elder blonde made a quick slash with the kunai. Naruto lifted his free arm when he saw the blade darting towards him. He diverted the strike, and used the hole in the enemy's guard to punch him in the stomach with all his strength. His adversary let go of his wrist and jumped back, slashing out with the kunai without really aiming. Naruto felt pain along his still protruding arm and stepped back himself, hissing from the burning sensation he felt and gripping his forearm where it hurt. He checked. A rivulet of blood was flowing from a little gash. His enemy had wounded him with that instinctive attack. Gritting his teeth, he shifted his attention to the other blonde, narrowing his eyes. Minato landed a few meters back and noticed how the other blonde was bleeding from the arm. It was just a lucky shot, a fast reflexive slash as he jumped back to study his opponent. The blonde boy was now standing still, watching the small bleeding wound on his hand with something akin to a 1,000-mile stare. Then he started shaking, much to Minato's confusion. Is he shell-shocked? Some kind of blood trauma, like Tsunade? How dare you? Said the shaking blonde, a hard note in his tone. Minato saw his expression and understood that the boy was not traumatized. He was furious. With him. Great, now I have an angry enemy. Why is he so pissed? It's just a bad scratch dash. How dare you attack me wearing his face, imposter. Wait. What? Before Minato could demand an explanation from Boy, the fake younger Minato had put his hands in a hand seal and was gathering chakra. Shit. I got careless. There was a great puff of smoke, and Minato found himself surrounded by at least 50 copies of his blonde adversary. Then they rushed him. Masahiro was slowly adding the cream to his coffee. He wanted to try a different taste this time, mostly because it seemed that the people at HQ had finished all the Arsawa family's sugar. The Yondaime has engaged the most powerful enemy. Luckily for us, he's extremely underpowered right now, he said to no one in particular, ignoring the shocked questions he received. Coffee. It could only be described as a continuous, frenetic dance of lunges, jabs, parries and spins. Hinata was barely keeping up. Her enemy was good and experienced with the style, which led to the obvious question. How had the fake ANBU learned a taijutsu style taught exclusively amongst her clan? Also she had been feeling a sense of déjà vu since the start of the fight. As she sidestepped a jab to her ribcage she understood. The fake ANBU, this snake. He wasn't just using her family's style. He was aiming for her pressure points. And there was only one way he could have been able to do that, even if it should have been impossible. He had the Byakugan. That was the reason for the sense of déjà vu. It was like fighting against Niji all over again, back in her first Chunin exams. No, not like fighting against Niji. It was clear that this enemy wanted to capture her, for some reason. She had already been captured once, when she was 3 years old, and that had cost Niji's father, her uncle, his life. Niji had died to save her, and Naruto-kun. She wouldn't permit this, traitor. Because she was certain now that her adversary was a traitor to her clan and her village, to render Niji's sacrifice useless. She shifted her pose and prepared to strike. 8 trigrams 64 palms. She shouted. As the battle started to get out of control, a single figure was crouched in a tiny, dark room on the second floor with a detached expression on his face. He had regained consciousness because he had heard a loud commotion, but he was still too drowsy to move. Which was a little shameful since he was one of Suna's best shinobi. But he had passed the late hours of the night, as almost everyone was asleep, drowning his sorrow with sake and quite a lot of chocolate bars he had bribed from Choji in exchange for a monthly supply of a very popular brand of chips produced exclusively in Suna, specially flavored. The Akimichi practically begged him to take the chocolate. It's not fair. Temari did it. Gaara did it. Why I can't get laid, thought the puppet master, searching for more sweets to forget the pain. No such luck. It seemed he'd eaten them all yesterday, judging by the quantity of waste around him. Well, that explained the stomach ache. I bet it's the makeup. Totally scaring the girls, his eyes widened as he realized what he'd just thought. It's not makeup. It's war paint. War paint. He was so focused on berating himself mentally for his slip of the tongue, mental tongue, that he didn't immediately hear the door opening. Then, his brain registered the sounds of battle, but it was already too late. When he tried to jump into a standing position, damn you, chocolate, he felt something hit his face, hard. Then he fell down and everything went dark. She smirked, letting go of the seal tag she had smashed in the enemy shinobi's face. When the seal activated itself, he went slack and fell to the junk-littered ground like a sack of potatoes. Hitting his face on the floor. Ouch. She would have winced, if he wasn't a potential threat to Konoha. But, why would an enemy sulk all alone in a room full of empty bottles and candy wrappers? Weird guy, this one. Nice work. There is another contact moving to your position right now, said the Uchiha on the radio. Masamiro or Masahiro, something like that. One down, a bunch more to go, she said, leaving the room. Guide me to him. Her. It's a kunoichi and, she is strong. So am I. Don't get cocky, Uzumaki-san. How does it feel being hit over and over again, huh? Answer me, screamed a slightly out-of-control Jugo to the man he was keeping pinned to the floor with a firm grip on his throat. Every word he said was followed by a punch to the face of his provoker that he gleefully delivered. He didn't seem to notice that the offender had fallen unconscious long ago. He was going to finally finish him, when he felt something whack him in the back of his head. Whatever he was going to ask died in his throat as he came face to face with a pair of fully matured Sharingan eyes. Sasuke was looking at him with an annoyed look that said to knock it off. Releasing his unconscious opponent, he started to calm down. He could feel his transformation slowly reversing. I am sorry, he said, in an apologetic tone. I lost control. Again. HN, muttered the last Uchiha as he resumed walking, stepping over the fallen enemy who moaned in pain in his unconsciousness. This was ridiculous. Minato was among the few shinobi able to use the Kagebushin, because let's face it, it just used so much chakra. But it was so damn useful, especially for managing the tedious paperwork. But he almost never used it in combat. Even when he did, he never created more than a couple of clones to distract the enemy. This kid, instead, he tossed around shadow clones like it was nothing. His entire style seemed to be based on using lots and lots of clones. Almost like it was the Tajukage Bushin. Impossible. That was one of Konoha's greatest and more guarded secrets. How did this impostor obtain it? Minato and his enemy were at a stalemate of sorts. The elder blonde wasn't able to pinpoint the original's position among his sea of clones. He had tried to put a seal for the Hiraishin on him but always got a clone instead. And thanks to the Yandame's superior speed, the clones hadn't been able to land a solid hit on him. Yet, he had to do something or it would just be a matter of time before the fake Minato used his superior numbers to finish him. Time to turn the odds in his own favor. He leaped high and landed on the ceiling, pouring chakra into his feet to hang from it. A simple adjustment to the grip on his three-pronged kunai, and he threw it at the amassed clones that covered most of the room's floor. Shuriken Kagebushin no Jutsu, said Minato. Well, it was a custom-made kunai instead of a shuriken, technically, but whatever. The technique still worked. The weapon multiplied mid-air as the jutsu created a swarm of copies of it. They fell on the clones like a rain of sharp, pointed steel. His breath was shallow, his whole body hurt and he couldn't move his left arm anymore. Also, he was sure that his opponent had aimed for non-vital points. Still hurt like a bitch, but if she had aimed to kill him, he would already be dead. So, this unknown child knew how to use one of the main house's exclusive techniques. The elders would have an apoplectic fit when they heard about it. Snake smiled grimly under his mask. It was clear he was losing. This girl was good. She almost reminded him of. His musings were interrupted when he had to sidestep and parry a not-so-gentle fist that almost hit him. But he miscalculated. Instead of hitting his right shoulder, the attack went higher, striking the right part of his mask, shattering it. It fell to the ground in pieces. He had sent Jugo to find Karen and Suigetsu on the upper floors. Sasuke kept descending, instead. He had almost arrived at the ground floor, when the windows beside him were broken by an ANBU team entering the building, dynamically, as Lee would say. Good. If the ANBU were here, maybe he could focus on searching for the leader of the attack as they managed the lesser threats and, why were they pointing their swords at him? I told you to stay away from the sand guy, people. Why don't you listen to me? Lamented Masahiro from his position at HQ. Nobody responded to the radio, of course. The sand guy had gotten them and they weren't able to move. For painful reasons, in a few cases. He was pretty much the only one left in the Aresawa's residence. Fugaku-sama had left when the young angry man had screamed nonsense about being the Uchiha clan head, muttering something along the lines of better guiding from the front. Lines that listened to this crazy stuff. Just with a lot more swearing, of course. And taking his clansmen with him. Masahiro had remained just because someone had to coordinate their efforts. The ANBU commander was nowhere to be seen. Not that it was difficult for Masahiro follow his movements. Shouldn't ANBU be less obvious about their intentions? And Shikaku Nara had gone to call for reinforcements from the other clans, along with some messengers. Masahiro was eager to see sense personally, the legendary Inoshikacho trio in action. Not that he would admit it. He was an Uchiha, after all. Speaking of Uchiha, why did one of the intruders feel like one? Kakashi ducked, avoiding a green, painful kick aimed at his temple just in the nick of time. The only reason he had been able to keep up was his Sharingan. Reading this enemy's movements was difficult. They were totally unpredictable, and his attacks were very powerful. The battle had created a little plaza in the previously narrow road. He, Asuma and Guy were hard-pressed even as they attacked from multiple directions with weapons, taijutsu and ninjutsu. Kurenai was trying to trap the enemy's mind in a genjutsu, but nothing she could think of seemed to work. It was like his brain was impervious to them, or he just plain ignored them. The only reason they weren't out cold or worse yet was because sometimes, when their opponent was on the point of landing a final blow on one of them, he would either lose his balance or stop suddenly before stumbling a few paces away, mumbling nonsense about youth. "Kakashi," said Guy, beside him, "I'm going to use that." "What?" "Guy, you just started to learn that." "Your sensei said." "I know." "But Kakashi," said the green-clad Chunin, meeting his eyes, "this imposter is even stronger than me in taijutsu. I have no choice." Guy closed his eyes, before flexing all his muscles. "First gate. Open." The mask fell to the ground, but Hinata didn't register the sound. She was completely mesmerized by the face in front of her. It was dirty. It was covered in scratches because of the mask's shards. There was enough stubble to be considered the start of a short beard. The hair was tied back and covered by a bandana. But she knew that face. What was going on? Snake was sure he would have collapsed at any moment. In addition to the previous injuries, he couldn't feel half of his face and was blinded from that side. The strange Byakugan user attack had hit one of his facial nerves and paralyzed everything around it. He wasn't even sure if he could hear from the right ear. He was pretty sure he would die with the next strike. Instead, this Hinata Hyuga froze, apparently shocked by something. Snake didn't waste the unexpected opportunity. With his only still functioning arm, he jabbed a pair of pressure points, just enough to knock her out. He passed through her guard with surprisingly ease, and she fell to the ground with a whimper, unconscious. When he was sure that she wasn't faking it, he leaned himself against the wall, for support. Slowly, inevitably, he failed and fell on his butt, his back against the wall. The last of her adversaries slammed to the wall, breaking through it and sailing across the room he'd just forcefully entered before finally landing and leaving a small crater on the other side of it. He then fell to the ground, knocked out cold. "Why is Anbu attacking us?" whispered Sakura as she adjusted her gloves. Maybe it wasn't really Anbu. Maybe it was an attempt to confuse Konoha's forces, approaching under the guise of an Anbu team to lower the defender's guard, and then attack to quickly dispatch them. "Too bad for these imposters, they ran into me," she smirked. She tilted her head when she heard a sound coming from the next hallway. A figure leaped into the room and threw a salvo of kunai at her. She easily avoided them, of course, but they were meant to be a distraction. As soon as she refocused on her attacker, all she could see was a blur of punches, slashes with something red and kicks. Sakura was keeping up, deflecting the various attacks, but her enemy was always at the edge of her vision, moving around her, attacking her from every possible direction. Like a whirlpool. She saw the red enemy's hand shoot toward her face from her peripheral vision. The pinkette grabbed the enemy's wrist firmly, unconsciously registering the paper sheet that was in her enemy's hand. An explosive tag, perhaps. Sakura pulled, putting all her strength behind it. Her enemy was sent flying toward the only wall still untouched on her floor. But instead of crashing into it, it was clear it was a woman now, landed gracefully on it, parallel to the carpet. Their gazes locked, and Sakura made a surprised noise. "You!" whispered the pinkette. The room was completely covered in the smoke created by the destruction of the clones. Minato couldn't see anything, even from his position on the ceiling, but he prepared some shuriken just in case. "You're a real asshole, you know that." "You ruined my floor," said a voice behind him. Minato spun and threw the shuriken, just to hit another clone, that dispelled immediately. "Time to end this," shouted not Minato's voice. Minato turned around once again, and saw his opponent charging toward him running on the ceiling, a clone right behind him that seemed to be charging chakra in some kind of jutsu. Well, his enemy was right. It was time to finish this. He started to run towards fake Minato, preparing his second most famous technique. When the two finally met at the center of the ceiling, they shouted their attack's name at the same time. "Rasen what?" The two Rasengan clashed with each other in an explosion of chakra. The blonde intruder knows the Rasengan, thought Masahiro. Well, that's interesting. Not amusing, but interesting. Interesting, but worrisome. How was it possible that the intruders knew how to recreate? Wait, what is that? Masahiro was sensing another presence on that floor. Who was that? He concentrated on the third presence, ignoring for a moment the clashing spinning chakra caused by the blondes that was almost blinding his senses. It was a clone. Apparently either one of the blonde intruder's clones had survived the Yandame's attack, or he'd created a new one. He was in another room, away from the battle with the Hokage. He seemed to be meditating, sitting perfectly still on the floor, and he was... What? This energy. Masahiro's eyes snapped open, completely in shock. Holy shit. Chapter 7. Fugaku was standing among his clansmen, and clanswomen, of the Konoha military police force. They were deployed all around the building, creating a line of defense impossible to pass. Well, if you didn't count that guy in green, where had he seen something similar, but that had happened before he'd arrived and taken charge of it. Nobody would pass on his watch. Sir. We have a problem. He heard Masahiro speak frantically through the earpiece. The enemy. Just tell me where this Uchiha clan head is, Masahiro, he interrupted coldly. Well, he is almost at the building's entrance, but I think he may really be an Uchiha. Also, the Hokage. Fugaku turned off the earpiece. His day was already crazy as it was. He didn't want to listen to ramblings about other Uchiha running around, besides his clansmen. He was eager for a fight against this unknown fool who dared to pretend to be the leader of Konoha's greatest clan. When he met the might of the military police, he was going to wish he'd never set foot in the village. What a prick, muttered Masahiro, after staring in shock at the now silent radio equipment. He switched channels. He had to tell somebody that the enemy was, apparently, able to use senjutsu. Sasuke left the building, walking slowly out of the main entrance, a fake standard ANBU sword in his hand courtesy of his owner, who was lying somewhere inside with 3, or was it 4, broken limbs. These imposters had sure done their work. The equipment really was indistinguishable from the stuff the ANBU operatives used in the field. And off duty. And while training. Well, the gear they always carried. The street was full of them. Imposters, thieves, who dared to use his bloodline on such a scale. Where had they gotten the eyes? He was sure that his own, and Obito's remaining one in Kakashi's eye socket, were the only Sharingan eyes in the world. Maybe Danzo had stolen them after the massacre, and placed them in suspension. Or had Orochimaru found a way to clone the bloodline he had desired so much? Oh well, it didn't matter. He would destroy them, humiliate them, and terrorize them. Not necessary in that order. And he knew just the right way to do it. Passing his thumb over the blade's edge, he drew a droplet of blood. Then, after a few seals, he slammed it onto the dusty ground. Kuchios. He yelled. Nothing happened. Why did nothing happen? Fugaku was not impressed. The enemy was young, very young, and didn't look that strong at all. However, he had to recognize that he at least looked like an Uchiha. Maybe one of his clansmen had an accident during a mission, years ago. He was sure that if that were the case, it would have been a clansman's fault. If an Uchiha woman had had a similar accident during a mission, she at least would have known if she'd conceived a baby. And it would have raised by the clan. The fake didn't seem afraid of the overwhelming numbers he was facing. Instead, he was slamming his hand on the soil, repeatedly. What is he doing? He wondered, not really asking to anyone. He seems to be, slamming his hand over and over on the ground, sir. Fugaku slowly turned to face the clansman, who seemed to have a real talent for stating the obvious, hoping to set him on fire if he glared at him hard enough. Sir, is our enemy retarded? Asked the Uchiha, unaware of Fugaku's glare. Fugaku gave the order to attack to put an end to his frustrations. It seemed that neither snakes nor hawks were answering his summons. Why was that? He had done the blood offering, he'd put in enough chakra to call a boss summon to his side, and he'd done the hand signs correctly. Then why couldn't he summon anything? Doesn't matter now. Ponder about that. After all, the fake Uchiha are begging for mercy, captured or dead, he thought as he noticed that they were charging him. After gathering more chakra, he formed the greatest gift the Sharingan had ever produced. Susanoo. The faces of the fake Uchiha as the giant purple chakra construct materialized just in front of them were priceless. Especially because, thanks to his own Sharingan, Sasuke could see the image in every small detail, anytime he wanted to. Yep, it was good to be an Uchiha, but at times like this it was even better. Fugaku froze, like all the Konoha shinobi in the nearby area, which mainly included the Uchiha and the few Anbu that were still around, and could only stare in horror and wonder at the huge, malevolent giant that was towering above them. He lowered his gaze to the enemy, who was encased by the purple, burning chakra that the giant seemed to be made of. Fugaku formed some hand seals, followed quickly by his fellow clansmen, and various fire jutsu were thrown toward the enemy. None of them breached the giant's skin that protected the enemy. As the young man inside the giant raised his arm, so did the large figure, whose hand was now carrying a flaming sword. Even from across the significant distance between them, the Uchiha leader could see that the enemy was smirking. "Fall back," whispered Fugaku before his voice regained more strength. "Fall back. Retreat." The sword finally descended. "Third gate. Open," yelled Guy. Kakashi and Asuma had to actually take a few steps back when the spandex-loving Chunin opened the second stage of the gates. Guy's skin turned a pale red shade and a green aura seemed to surround his body. Then, he charged the opponent that Kakashi's team had been fighting up till now. The battle wasn't going well. Guy's lookalike was totally untouchable by any of Kakashi, Asuma and Kurenai's attacks. They had tried everything. Hand-to-hand, weapons, explosive tags, ninja wire. At a certain point, Kakashi and Asuma tried to use Kakashi's chain to trap him, but he just broke free like it was nothing. They couldn't hit him with a jutsu because the enemy's movements were just too unpredictable. And Kurenai was getting more and more frustrated because her favorite way to dispose of her adversaries wasn't working. Guy seemed to be the only one to actually be able to punch the enemy, and he'd had to open the second gate for that. The two young men were a blur of green. Kicking, dodging, punching and moving. Kakashi knew that his self-proclaimed eternal rival was putting his body under incredible stress. If things continued like this, no, even if they were just temporary teammates, they would not die in front of him. Not again. He started to charge a Chidori in his hand, and waited for the right moment. Maybe Guy would give him an opening, pressing the enemy like that. The air started to resound with the chirping of his lighting. After a quick exchange of blows, the fake Guy and the original were locked in a stalemate as they grabbed their adversary at the same time. One's face was contorted with the effort of controlling the gate's energy, the other looked strangely relaxed. There. Kakashi ran towards the enemy, the chirping sound now at its climax. He raised the hand surrounded by electricity, took aim, only to have his own wrist grabbed by the enemy in a steel grip. What? He wasn't even looking. The fake Guy pulled down, making the Chidori impact the ground and releasing his hold only when the silver-haired boy's hand was already underground. Kakashi's arm penetrated in the dirt up to his elbow. The intruder was ready to attack him, and Kakashi knew he was in a dangerous position where he could barely defend himself. Shit! My arm is stuck. I'm dead. As this thought ran through Kakashi's mind, Guy used the breach in his enemy's guard to uppercut him. This time, the enemy couldn't parry in time. Fake Guy was sent roaring through the air, and faster than the blink of an eye, Guy joined him mid-air, punching him back to the ground. He didn't stop his attack even after the impact for a few seconds. Then he staggered back of a few paces, exhausted. He had closed the gates now, and was paying for it. As soon as Kakashi was able to finally free his arm, thanks to Kurenai and Asuma's help, he and the other two members of his team ran towards Guy's position. The dust raised by the beating hadn't settled yet. Guy! Are you okay? Called Asuma. I am fine, said the bowl-cut boy, the green beast of Konoha is. Oh, my head, said a voice from the middle of the dust. Don't tell me I actually drank something last night. The single Jonin and both sets of Chunin's eyes widened when they heard their enemy's voice. A figure emerged from the dust, and they prepared to fight once again. They were exhausted, but they wouldn't go down without a fight. The intruder didn't seem to be hurt by the beating, he just seemed a little dirty, and he was massaging his head, as if he had a simple headache. What kind of freak was this guy? Said freak seemed to notice them, but was similarly mesmerized by Guy, who was standing in his trademark taijutsu fighting stance, ready for another battle if necessary. A few seconds of absolute silence passed. Then the freak spoke. At high volumes. And doing the classic nice guy pose that Guy loved to do all the time. Well sh. Young one, you are extremely youthful. I must introduce you to my sensei. If I am not able to introduce you, I shall. They never knew what he would have done because he stopped talking, his eyes became glassy, his face started to tick and then he fell on his back, foaming at the mouth. His arms still protruded forward in the nice guy pose. Another completely quiet moment passed. What's wrong with him? Asked Asuma, saying the question everybody wanted to ask. I think, started Kurenai, unsure. I think that all the genjutsu I placed on him during the fight are finally having effect. All at once. Huh. What is he seeing, exactly? Questioned Asuma, a little worried about the strange tic and spasms their now incapacitated enemy was having. Trust me. You don't want to know, you. Whispered the pinkette. Sakura was considered one of Konoha's smartest. Among her peers, she only found a rival in brainpower in Shizun, Shino and Shikamaru, but he didn't count. Nobody was smarter than Shikamaru. She was also the second student of the Godame Hokage, and a battle-hardened kunoichi to boot. None of that helped to suppress the disbelief she felt when she understood who the person in front of her was. Oh, you've heard of me? Chirped Kushina Uzumaki, who was still attached to the wall. That position gave a strange feeling to their conversation. Like it couldn't be more absurd. She had met Naruto's mother on one occasion, but that had happened in an alternate world generated by a genjutsu she and her blonde teammate had been trapped in by Obito, when they still hadn't know his real identity. The person in front of her looked much younger. Sakura also knew that Kushina Uzumaki had died the day she'd given birth to Naruto. And the woman in front of her didn't look like an Edo tensei, so that left only one possible conclusion. Imposter. I've heard of who you're pretending to be, she said, gritting her teeth. Pretending? Said the redhead, arching an eyebrow. You know, you're lucky to not been have found by a friend of mine. He would have been utterly pissed if he found out that you were using that face. Huh, this is my face. No, it's not. If Kushina Uzumaki were still alive. The redhead leaped, soaring towards the pink-haired girl and aiming a roundhouse kick at her head. Sakura parried the blow with both arms. For a normal shinobi, such a blow would have at least made them stagger a few feet back, but for Sakura, it didn't budge her strength-enhanced stance in the slightest. Still hurt like getting hit by a sledgehammer. I'm very much alive, Databane. Yelled the impersonator, as she landed. She didn't lose any time before attacking Sakura once again. Oh, it was on. Shinaro. He was walking through the hallways and stairwells of the empty building. Gaara. The Hogake would refund him for the loss of his hat. It wasn't just the symbol of his office, but also something that had been a part of Suna since its founding, a piece of his village's history. Gaara. There was also the personal matter of disturbing his and Matsuri's privacy. Sending Anbu to summon him like that, it was just rude. Gaara. Also there was the fact that he couldn't find his pants anywhere. He'd had to use his sand armor to make it look like he was wearing pants. Gaara. Every so often either a solitary Anbu or a team of them would appear in front of him. No matter how many Tsunade sent to him to stall for time, she would pay. Financially and by apologizing formally. Gaara, I'm talking to you. He just kept walking without even listening to the stuff they were trying to tell him. Probably excuses. Gaara, I know you can hear me. He just pushed them away with his sand, enveloping them and applying just the necessary pressure to the shifting grains to either immobilize them or make them pass out. Why was this building so difficult to navigate? What was its architect thinking? Gaara, thundered the bijou from inside his seal. What? The young Kazekage asked mentally, flatly, is it, Shikaku? Look out the window. Gaara stopped on his tracks at that strange request, but complied anyway. It wasn't like the Ichibi was asking him to murder someone. That was an old phase in their partnership. He turned towards the window, and he saw it. That is dash. Yes. There are only. Yes. But how? No idea. A moment of silence passed, young man and bijou watching the Hokage monument that was clearly visible in this bright morning light. Naruto, the Godame Kazekage said finally, sighing. He didn't know what was happening, but he was sure that his blonde friend was involved. When something weird was going on, he almost always was. He turned on his heels and started to move towards Naruto's apartment. As his sister's boyfriend would say, troublesome, muttered Shikamaru. Temari would have agreed, if she wasn't busy being embarrassed out of her mind and hiding behind her boyfriend. Shikamaru and Temari had just joined up with the others of Shika's team, plus Sai and Tenten. So they had clearly seen their current predicament. Choji was looking away, his face redder than her own, if that was even possible. Did you lose your clothes during the battle? Asked Sai, who was staring instead, with that blank expression of his. That question earned him a verbal lashing from Ino, but Temari was too focused on her desire to just be swallowed by the ground. Too bad she didn't know a justa for that. Kunai. Finally. Exclaimed Tenten, who seemed more interested in looting weapons from their collapsed enemies. Choji, give me your shirt, said Ino as soon she finished berating Sai for his social awkwardness. What? Why? Sputtered the tall and big-boned boy. If possible, his face had reached an even deeper crimson shade. Just do it. The Akimichi gave in, and passed his shirt to Ino, who in turn passed it to Temari, who quickly snatched it from her fellow blonde's grasp. Choji's face was so red, it nearly turned his clan markings invisible. Temari put the shirt on, muttering something in gratitude, and discovered it easily reached her knees. Not exactly fighting attire, but she could stop standing behind her man. As soon as she was decent, Shika seemed to relax a little. The sand girl knew that expression. Shimakaru had started to plan. He woke up slowly, feeling pain all over his body. Why was that? Oh right, the Tenketsu points. He sensed the presence of someone kneeling over him. Had his enemy woken up too? Was she going to finish him? He tried to move, but he couldn't lift his undamaged arm. He couldn't even find the strength to open his eyes. I suppose this is the end, then, thought Snake, resigned to his fate. But it was not the end. He felt the pain soothing away slowly, subsiding until he felt numb where he had been struck. His mind was also very light, almost floating. Slowly opening his eyes, he saw that the commander was beside him, using a very basic first aid jutsu on him. That explained the dizziness. The commander had probably healed the point where he'd been struck on the face. Hi, no names, the commander hastily shushed him. Snake bit his lips at his almost slip-up. Damn lightheadedness. He turned to watch the prone figure of his enemy, the unknown Byakugan user. Her hands and feet were tied together behind her back with some ninja wire, courtesy of the commander, he supposed. The ANBU leader followed his gaze. How did she reduce you to such a state? She, a little cough interrupted the infiltrator. She can use the 64 palms. She can do what? Hissed the only masked ANBU in the hallway. Yes. Caught me by surprise. They both looked at the prone, unconscious girl for a long minute. The elders are going to have an apoplectic fit when they hear this, said the commander when he finished applying the first aid. Snake seemed to laugh a little, but instead it was small cough. No way a Hyuga would laugh that way, so it had to be a cough. He was injured, after all. You know, she looks like, started the ANBU leader. Yes, she looks almost like her. The group of shinobi landed on the rooftop of one of the various houses that surrounded the building. It seemed that since the assault had started, things had gone awry. If you could call a purple, flaming giant awry. Troublesome, muttered Shikaku, who had led reinforcements from the various clans back to the area of operations. With him, in front of the reinforcements, were his teammates Inoichi, the eternal Yamanaka bachelor, and Choza, who was recently named head of his clan. Among the Jonin and Tokubetsu Jonin group he was able to put together there were Tsum and Shibi, the heirs of their respective clans. What the hell is that thing? Barked Tsum, crouching beside her companion Kuramaru. Whatever it is, we're going to need the big guns to put it down, murmured Inoichi. Oh, good. That would be us. Said a loud voice from behind the group. Everybody turned to face the newcomers, their eyes widening when they saw them. The former Sandame, Sarutobi Hiruzen, was standing there in full battle gear. At his sides were his former students still present in the village, Jiraiya and Orochimaru. And a little behind them there was a young Uchiha girl who seemed to be in awe of being in the presence of three living legends. But Shikaku could understand that feeling. Too bad Tsunadeheim isn't here, sensei. Asked Jiraiya, amused by the shock on everyone's faces. Now is not the time for nostalgia, Jiraiya, said Orochimaru, never letting his gaze waver from the chakra construct. He looked like he was trying to discern what jutsu had been used to create something like that. Indeed, said Sarutobi Shikaku, can you fill us in on the situation? Ayumi was standing a little behind the two sennin and their former teacher, the previous Hokage. She was so in awe at being among these powerful shinobi, that she wasn't even listening to what the Nara clan head was saying. The fact that her brother started screaming in her earpiece a second later didn't help. Ayumi, I know that you're standing literally a step from Jiraiya-sama. Give your radio to him or I swear, I'll tell everyone that you have a stash of all his books under the floor of your bedroom. Fighting to avoid the blush that almost broke through her stoic mask, she quickly complied. Damn Masahiro nii. I can't believe he's still blackmailing me with that. And that is all we know, sir, finished Shikaku. I see. Then my students and I will battle that thing, whatever it is, said the Sandame, slowly watching the assembled shinobi and ignoring Jiraiya who was talking with the girl who had followed him like a lost puppy. You should concentrate your efforts on either subduing or eliminating the intruders and Minato is fighting a what? The sage of Mount Mayaboku suddenly shouted. Canary had to scratch his nose. Of course, he couldn't. Because he was glued on the wall by a 2-inch layer of thick sand that covered his whole body, save the head. There was also sand under his mask. And in his pants. And it itched. But at least he was alive, right? His teammates were in a similar situation and they had all ceased to struggle when it had become clear that they wouldn't be able to free themselves on their own. Unlike his teammates, though, Canary was stuck to the wall upside down. He really wanted to scratch his nose. And his, what happened to you? Asked a voice from outside his field of vision. He wasn't able to move his head. Sand guy got us, sir, he heard his squad leader say. Sir, you're lucky to be alive then, from what Masahiro told me, said the ANBU commander, when he passed right in front of Canary. The commander is here, thought Canary. It seemed that the end of his career in ANBU was closer than he expected. He was carrying an unconscious person over his shoulder, who was wrapped in only a bathrobe. He was also helping a wounded, maskless ANBU stay on his feet. Can you still be an ANBU if you lose your mask? Mused Canary. Flock team, I require your support to extract this prisoner and take her to a holding facility and to escort this ANBU outside the combat zone. He requires medical attention. I'm assuming you won't mind if I free you from your predicament to carry out my orders. Fugaku gritted his teeth and dodged another swipe from the flaming sword, allowing a team of his men to escape from the giant's fury. The rogue ninja was toying with them. He was sure of this. They couldn't hit him with anything they threw at him, and he had shown himself capable of causing incredible amounts of damage. He could have killed a lot of them, perhaps even all of them, without any great effort. But it seemed he was enjoying missing them barely, for some reason. That's right. Run! Screamed the enemy. Even if he was far away, and encased in whatever that thing shaped as an armored warrior was, Fugaku was able to see his smirk. The bastard was enjoying this. Taunting them, playing with them from behind the barrier that the giant formed all around him. Fugaku's eye widened in realization. The giant was protecting the enemy, but it wasn't touching the ground where the boy was standing. Maybe it could work. It wasn't his main affinity. It was actually his weakest affinity, but it was worth a shot. Fugaku started forming the necessary hand seals. Sasuke blinked when he saw one of the fake Uchiha disappear into the ground, leaving a hole in his place. Some kind of retreating jutsu, maybe? No matter. He would get him later. He was enjoying scaring the shit out of them, he had to admit it. After all, they deserved far more than this, those eye stealers. They had to understand what it meant to desecrate his clan's memory like this. He would have already killed them, but he didn't want to cause too much collateral damage to the buildings. The Godame would probably have had him rebuild them personally, as a series of unpaid D-rank missions. One for every house wrecked. Also destroying half of the village wouldn't help his already soiled reputation. Pardoned or not, he had been an enemy of Konoha for some time. Several people had long memories and never let him forget it. Sasuke's instincts flared up, sensing an incoming attack from under him. The ground exploded, and one of those eye stealers arose from below, thrusting a sword toward his belly. It was the one who'd disappeared. He had not retreated, he had attacked from the weak spot of his Susanu's defense. Sasuke moved to the side, and avoided being impaled by the cunning shinobi. His enemy's sword just nicked his left side. As his attacker completely emerged from the dirt, Sasuke tried to finish him with a single blow of the sword he had acquired before leaving the building. But the man was a skilled swordsman, and after a fast parry that deflected Sasuke's blow, the two of them were quickly exchanging slashes and strokes in the middle of the last Uchiha Susanoo. Why does this man seem so familiar? His enemy was an Uchiha. He was sure of it now. His theory of a bastard born outside of his clan was still valid, since he'd never seen him before. Parry. Feint. Slash. But only an Uchiha could have those eyes. The eyes which existence was a secret even among the clan, with the exception of the clan head and elders. Dodge. Spin. Thrust. Manjikyu. Parry. Counterattack. Fireball Jutsu. The intruder who had attacked his clansmen had the Manjikyu. Kami helped them. Avoid. Jump. Lunge. It was clear that Fugaku was being pushed towards the inner walls of the imposing figure that surrounded the two combatants. He didn't know what would happen if he touched them, but he didn't want to discover it firsthand. Redirect. Duck. Sidestep. Fugaku could feel the chakra boiling and burning a foot from his back. It was an horrible and oppressing sensation, and he knew he had to move from there. The boy, no, someone who had done what was necessary to obtain the Manjikyu couldn't be considered a boy anymore, pressed him further. Deflect. Step. Step. Atta. His enemy ducked and passed below his guard. Shit. The sword of Fugaku's enemy ran through his gut. Pain. As Fugaku bit his lips to not giving the bastard the satisfaction of hearing him scream. But even then, a sound similar to the whining of a wounded dog escaped him. His blade fell to the ground. It was then that he noticed the expression on his enemy, the shinobi who had just killed him, had morphed from one of disdain to one of horror. Why would he, father? Fugaku's eyes widened before he lost consciousness. Fugaku is down, said one of the shinobi assembled on the roof. There were some stifled gasps among the group, but Orochimaru barely heard the words. He was looking at the imposing figure coated in, no, it was formed from chakra, that was being attacked by the Uchiha enraged at the loss of their clan head, with all various kind of jutsu to no avail. He could feel, taste its power. What he wouldn't do to obtain a jutsu capable of doing that. What he could do with such a thing at his disposal. Inwardly, he was licking his lips. We have lost enough time. Snapped the former Sandame, unwittingly interrupting Orochimaru's dark musings. Since the time he had still been a genin, his sensei's voice had been able to catch his attention immediately. Jiraiya, you will go assist the Hokage against this mysterious sage, continued the old monkey Orochimaru, and I will engage the enemy fighting against the military police. Shikaku, you and the rest of the group will head inside and subdue or neutralize any other intruders present in the area. Everyone nodded without asking questions. As his sensei leaped from the roof, everyone followed, heading towards their objectives. Orochimaru couldn't remember the last time he, or Jiraiya, had fought in the same combat zone beside their sensei. A part of him he wouldn't admit existed wanted to smile. It really was a pity that Tsunade was not with them. Sasuke just stood there, frozen in shock, as the body of the man he had just stabbed fell to the ground, his blood on the sword that was still on his grip. It can't be. Among these fake Uchiha, there is even an impostor of my father, he thought, unable to divert his gaze from the prone form at his feet. He was aware of the other enemies just outside his Susanoo, who were using various attacks and jutsu to attempt to bypass the protection of the chakra construct in vain. He was aware of them, but his mind didn't register them any more than that. But why do such a thing? Fugaku Uchiha had died 10 years ago, during the massacre. Itachi killed him, everybody knew that. Very few were aware of the truth behind the slaughter of the Uchiha clan, even among Sasuke's peers. Why this charade? Creating a double of Fugaku served no purpose at all. Especially because he didn't look as if he'd aged at all. If possible, he seemed even younger than how Sasuke had remembered him. Plastic surgery on the man that had received the eyes. Or maybe, if Orochimaru was behind this, it was an actual clone. Why clone only the eyes, after all, when you could clone the whole body? There was no way he would fall for such trickery. Sasuke could feel his righteous rage coming back, and a thundering boom echoed for a moment as Sasuke felt Susanoo stagger from a massive blow it had just received. Sasuke's gaze left the prostrated body at his feet, only to see the face of another dead man. Just outside the walls of his Susanoo, still in mid-air, was Hiruzen Sarutobi, the Sandame, in full battle gear and holding his legendary staff, the alternate form of the Monkey King, Enma. This was not the same man who had died during the invasion orchestrated by Orochimaru years ago, or his reanimated Edo Tensei. He also looked younger and far stronger than Sasuke could remember from his memories. Impossible, thought Sasuke, as the god of shinobi landed on the ground in front of him. It was only then that Sasuke noticed the Hokage mountain behind this new attacker. The Godame's head was missing from the monument. No, thought a disbelieving Sasuke. A genjutsu. Surely it was a genjutsu. It had to be one. A genjutsu was actually a better explanation than an army of clones. Kai, said Sasuke, making an hand seal. Nothing happened, and the fake Sarutobi outside Susanoo arched one of his graying eyebrows. Kai, he shouted, applying more chakra this time. Once again, nothing changed. Outside Susanoo, the Sarutobi lookalike kept attacking him, only to have the chakra construct intercept his staff with both its hands and keep it in place. It was a powerful genjutsu if he wasn't able to dispel it with a chakra pulse. But Sasuke was starting to doubt it really was a genjutsu. He wouldn't doubt that Naruto wouldn't realize about being ensnared in one for a long time. But Sakura and Karen, too? Both of them, without realizing it? Improbable. For a second, the idea of using Izanami crossed his mind, but he quickly eradicated it. He would not destroy one of Itachi's eyes to dispel a genjutsu he was having more and more doubts about actually existing. Someone else arrived beside the fake Sarutobi minus was he really a fake, minus and started attacking him. Susanoo protected the young Uchiha, deeply immersed in his reasoning. This, whatever it was. This could be a genjutsu. Or maybe it wasn't. He couldn't lose one eye if he wasn't certain, and the chakra pulse normally used to dispel illusions didn't work. There was only one alternative, then. Without hesitation, Sasuke passed his palm on the edge of his sword, cutting deep. Pain. Sasuke hissed. It was real pain. No, he whispered, falling on his knees. Susanoo received another barrage from outside. It was real. The blood of his father mixed with his own. No minus no. He cried, embracing his parents' still form. He didn't even realize that his attackers had stopped, confused by his reaction. It was then that a pained wheeze escaped from Fugaku's lips. He's alive, realized Sasuke. Thank Kami, he's still alive minus what do I do? What do, Karen? He carefully lifted his father's body, hoisting him over his shoulders. As he rose, he finally noticed the other person standing beside Sarutobi. It was Orochimaru, dressed in an almost normal way and with a Konoha forehead protector, the sword of Kusanagi in his hand, who was looking at him with great interest. Whatever. He had stuff to do now. Deal with this Orochimaru later. He leaped towards a window of the building, carrying his father with him. Between the hurry, the shock and the adrenaline still running in his veins, he forgot to deactivate his Susanoo. That hit, and destroyed, an entire side of the building. Shikaku saw the chakra-coated enemy leap towards the building, causing a lot of damage, but didn't stop. He was leading his team towards the structure, and had his orders. Choza. Right in front of us, first floor. Open an entrance to us. He called, without looking back. He heard his teammates' affirmative grunt as the Akimichi hastened his pace and moved in front of the team's formation. Choza leaped, greatly increasing his size while in mid-air but keeping the momentum of his jump. As he hit the point indicated by Shikaku, the wall of bricks and concrete was broken like it had been built of cardboard. Shikaku and Inoichi were right behind their old-time friend when they entered the building. The first thing the Nara saw was a young man with a distinctive hairstyle, who was wearing just a pair of briefs and was attempting to steal the pants off of an unconscious ANBU operative. He didn't seem to be older than 18, tops. Beside him were standing a beautiful blonde girl and a big-boned. He had stopped using the word fat or other synonyms long ago, knowing how that ticked off Choza, young man with a bare chest. They were staring at them, and seemed to be quite shocked by their entrance. The Inoshikacho trio charged the intruders. The whole building shook violently without warning, and Kiba had to struggle to maintain his equilibrium for a second. Akamaru whined. What the hell was that? It seems the building we are in sustained some heavy structural damage a few floors below us, stated calmly Shino. Why, you ask? Because minus. Not the time, Shino. Barked Kiba. The Inuzuka knew that, outside of an emergency situation, his friend would have started to sulk at that comment, feeling ignored. But since the village was probably under attack, he knew that Shino would wait until the crisis was over before becoming depressed. Who do you think could be attacking us? It's not easy, infiltrating ANBU. Before Shino could give an answer to that, Akamaru started growling, feeling hostiles in their proximity. The two young shinobi tensed, ready for anything. Then a small group of Konoha jonin entered the hallway, moving in formation. The two males of Team 8 relaxed and gave a sign of greeting, only to be shocked and they were attacked by their comrades. Damn, that was a big blow, mumbled Temari, as she, Sai and Tenten passed through the salon of one of the biggest apartments in the building. Besides the one on the top floor, which belonged to Naruto. Following Shika's plan, they had to locate the ceiling scroll where they'd put all their weapons yesterday at the start of the party. Even if they'd followed Ino's stupid no weapons at a party rule, that didn't mean they had left their stuff unattended. Paranoia was part of being a shinobi, after all. And now that they were under attack, Temari felt naked without her war fan. Well, more naked than she was already. There was only one problem. Are you sure that this is the way to Naruto's apartment? Asked the Suna Kunoichi. I don't know. The last thing I remember from yesterday night is Sai dancing on the table, juggling sake bottles and drinking them at the same time. Responded Tenten, who was armed to the teeth. She was carrying almost every weapon they had found on those guys dressed like Anbu who had attacked them, with the exception of a few kunai and a pair of swords that her companions were carrying. Did I really do that? Asked Sai, a little astonishment in his voice. Yes, responded both of the Kunoichi. I don't remember it, mumbled Sai. Oh yes, last night had been a wild party, indeed. They trashed the place, in the metaphorical and literal sense. The ceiling that collapsed right in front of the improvised team with a loud smash and spayed the whole room with a fine dust, was not metaphorical at all. Survival instinct kicked in and the three shinobi jumped back, weapons at the ready. Damn it, Canary. What's wrong with your feet, today? Yelled someone from inside the cloud. Just exactly how many enemies have infiltrated the village? It doesn't make sense. Kiba said loudly as he kicked some fake jonin in the chin. True. Such a large quantity of unknown shinobi would never have passed unnoticed. Why? Because an attack like this would require months of preparation and, really not the time, Shino. Sorry. Kiba interrupted, dodging a volley of shuriken. Nobody pays attention to me, murmured Shino, slightly depressed at being dismissed so quickly by his teammate. Kiba dodged another kunai, realizing almost too late that it had an explosive tag attached to it. The explosion just singed him, but set the wooden floor behind him on fire. Now Kiba wasn't pissed anymore. He was furious. Not for the floor, of course. He didn't care for the floor at all. He was furious because since he had awakened, with a bad combination of hangover, nausea and who know what else, he had been attacked, repeatedly, by these sneaky assholes. Time to get serious. Let's go, Akamaru. Ready? He said to his hinged partner, who yipped approvingly. Kiba leaped, starting to spin his body, followed by Akamaru. Gatsu, Getsuga. Interrupted another voice. Kiba was hit before he could start his trademark attack and tumbled to the ground in pain. As he started to get up and defend himself from this new attacker, he saw a young woman who sported his own clan markings on her face running towards him. Kiba sniffed the air reflexively. Why is her scent the same as Mom? That was his last coherent thought before said woman kicked him in the nuts with a chakra-enhanced blow. That's for copying my clan. She screamed as Kiba emitted a piercing howl and rolled into a fetal position, in pain. When Shino heard the shriek behind him, he knew he should check on his teammate but he didn't dare turn his gaze from the fully cloaked figure in front of him, who was dressed in the same manner as the Aburame clan. Shino amassed his swarm around him, ready to attack. His opponent did the same, with bugs of his own. Both Shino and his opponent cocked an eyebrow at that. The young Aburame recognized the bugs used by his adversary as Kikeichu, a species bred exclusively by his clan and used as allies. There were no jutsu in the Aburame clan that didn't require the use of those bugs. Why did this intruder have them? If possible, the man in front of him was just as shocked as Shino. Not that they were actually showing it. Shino was also aware that none of the other enemies were attacking him yet, so he risked a peek at his teammate. Kiba was down, a woman who strongly resembled the Inuzuka clan head, was tying his hands behind his back. Akamaru instead was whining, prostrating on his back and exposing his throat to the giant dog that was growling at him. A gesture that was used among dogs to show submission to the alpha, the leader of the pack. Curious. Normally Akamaru would have fought to the death to protect his partner. Focusing again on the other bug user, he decided to take a calculated gamble. He ordered his swarm to exchange information with the other. To his surprise, the enemy swarm reciprocated. Nobody moved for a few minutes, not daring to interrupt this strange scene. Even the rest of the attackers limited themselves to just surrounding Shino. Finally, the bugs stopped the information exchange and came back to their hosts. And passed them the information that had been gathered. Curious, muttered the young Aburame. Indeed, responded his opponent. There is only one logical action I can undertake, then, said Shino. I surrender. Let me go. I can fight. Protested Snake, as the commander laid him down behind the rubble of the former floor minus and ceiling minus that had collapsed under their feet, while Flock Team engaged a trio of enemies. Beside him, Snake could see their unconscious prisoner. No, you cannot, the commander told him. Stay put and watch the prisoner. Snake gritted his teeth. He hated being dead weight. The commander joined the fray. They got Hinata. We have to help her. A feminine voice shouted. Snake activated his Byakugan to see how the fight was going. There were 3 enemies. A pale boy, who was holding his sword in a style similar to the ANBU standard style. A blonde girl dressed in an overflowing shirt with the kanji for food on it, armed with a similar blade, but seemed less proficient at it than her teammate. And lastly, a brown-haired girl, literally covered in weapon holsters, who was throwing kunai, shuriken, senbon and swords around. She smiled gleefully as the ANBU barely avoided them. She had plenty of ammunition and was preventing Flock Team from engaging in close combat. Except for the operative Canary, who was out cold, having hit his head when they landed after the floor caved in. Sigh! Yelled the same voice as before, and Snake was able to see that it was the blonde. We need reinforcements. Paint something. Paint, thought Snake. Some kind of tool for a jutsu. The above-mentioned Sai smirked, and one of his hand went to a pouch he carried on his belt. Snake saw his eyes widen. My ink. It's gone. What? Did you store that in the scroll too? Asked the blonde girl in disbelief. No, Ino said that not even Tenten could use it as a weapon. And I always carry it with. His speech was interrupted when the 2 standing members of Flock Team attacked him, hoping to use his distraction to dispose of him. No such luck. This Sai character was very skilled with a blade and seemed to hold off the 2 ANBU at once with little effort. Snake could tell that it was not the way he was used to fighting, but he was still pretty good. The commander was distracting the 2 girls, coming at them from the side only to fall back when the blonde prepared a jutsu, or the girl with the buns started throwing her weaponry at him. He was playing with them. Show off. Flock Team was pressing the dark-haired boy, coming at him from 2 sides at the same time, only for him to change his position. But he was getting separated from his teammates, creating an opening in their formation. Snake reached for his kunai holster and unsheathed one of the short weapons. Even if he couldn't move, he could still help. He waited for his chance, and threw the kunai towards his target. The boy. The pale young man sensed the incoming kunai, and with a spin and quick slash, deflected the weapon that would have otherwise struck him in the back of his head. Remarkable. But he had left an opening, and Flock Team quickly put it to good use, tackling him to the ground and subduing him. Or killing him. He didn't care and didn't check. He was more interested in the commander's fight. The ANBU leader changed tactics as soon as he saw the other enemy fall. He charged the 2 kunoichi directly. The bun-haired one threw so many weapons at him that a normal shinobi, no matter how talented or trained, couldn't possibly have dodged them all. But the ANBU leader was not a normal shinobi. With his Byakugan, Snake saw the commander release chakra from his tenketsu points and starting a rotatory motion with his feet. Kaiten. He heard. A dome of spinning chakra was formed by the commander's movement, creating a rotating shield that deflected the incoming attack. All the weapons clattered to the floor or embedded themselves into the walls. The girls had to dodge the volley of metal unleashed back at them. Flock Team was quickly on the blonde one, who was knocked out when she got distracted by the weapon barrage. The bun-haired one instead stood frozen in shock, probably didn't expect that kind of defense, and was knocked down by the commander with a single jab of the gentle fist. After securing the new prisoners minus all 3 of them, so the boy was alive minus one of Snake's comrades come back to help him, as the other 2 transported the prisoners, a pair each. The commander was looking at him, a frown behind the mask. He was expecting it. After all, Snake knew he had disobeyed a direct order. Told you I could still fight, Snake said smugly. You know babe, if you weren't an enemy, I wouldn't mind engaging you in a different kind of brawl. Know what I mean? Inoichi said winking, after a quick clash with the only female in the room. Shikaku rolled his eyes inwardly. Sometimes his friend could be really troublesome. It was not a tactic, the Nara knew that the Yamanaka really was flirting with an enemy during a fight. The fact that most kunoichi would get enraged and be less focused on the battle around them was an unexpected bonus. To Shikaku's surprise, the girl didn't get mad because of the Yamanaka bachelor's innuendo. Instead, she seemed both disgusted and horrified. Strange. Even her companion seemed to be quite disturbed by that, for some reason. Seeing their adversaries' hesitation, Choza charged them with a signature move of the Akimichi clan, the human bullet tank. Shikaku had seen it innumerable times. Choza's body expanded and he started to spin with more force than a tornado, launching itself towards the intruders, only to be intercepted and repelled by another similar sphere of similar size. The bare-chested boy was the ball. He was using the human bullet tank. How was that possible? The two speeding balls collided and bounced around, obliterating everything in their path. Both groups had to jump away to avoid being crushed. Inoichi started doing the necessary hand seals for one of his own family jutsu and aimed it at the blonde beauty on the other side of the room. After a few seconds, the blonde man stared at his own hands in shock. It didn't work. He whispered. Shikaku barely heard him. The kunoichi charged Inoichi, screaming like a banshee, taking the older man by surprise and started to pummel him to the ground with a flurry of kicks and punches. What are you doing, Inoichi? Possess her. Shikaku shouted without looking away from his scantily clad adversary, who was gazing at him in a cold, calculating manner that seemed to mirror his own. I can't. She's resisting it. Shouted Inoichi, who was still suffering under the girl's assault. Pig. Pervert. Son of a, screamed the girl, hitting the man one more time for every insult thrown at him. What? Exclaimed Shikaku, almost breaking eye contact with the only enemy who hadn't moved yet. I don't know. Arg. Let me go, crazy bitch. The Yamanaka responded, as he struggled to defend himself. Around them, the two spinning human balls kept clashing with each other, defending their comrades from the other one when he moved towards them. Suddenly, the boy dressed in briefs started forming hand seals. His shadow started to morph and darted towards Shikaku, running over the floor. Impossible, thought the Jonin as his eyes widened. Instinctively he formed the hand seals for the same jutsu the boy had just used, a jutsu exclusive to the members of the Nara clan. The two tendrils of shadows collided in the middle of the space between them. Shikaku started ignoring the chaos around him. The girl's insults, Inoichi's comebacks and the two human wrecking balls, it didn't matter anymore. This match was getting all his attention. An external observer would have thought that it was a very static match, but it was not like that at all. It was like arm wrestling, only with shadows and chakra. And Shikaku was slowly losing, he knew that. When Shikaku was finally overcome and he was trapped in his enemy's shadows, he cursed himself for being so careless. Who is this boy? When he felt a shadow tendril crawl across his skin and then clutch at his throat, ready to choke him, his blood froze. What a troublesome death. And embarrassing, too. Killed by a jutsu of my own clan. His eyes again met those of the boy that had his life literally in his hands. And his enemy smirked. We surrender, he said, dismissing his shadows and freeing Shikaku. What, thought the Nara. One of the balls, the big-boned young man, stopped. We do. Asked the shirtless, no longer spinning shinobi in confusion. Yes, we do. Oh, good. Creep. Deviant. Weirdo. Motherphew, screamed the girl, still oblivious to everything besides the poor Inoichi. Who were these people? A punch landed on the wall of the bathroom, obliterating a large portion of the nicely crafted blue tiles that decorated it, pulverizing the concrete behind them and opening a wide passage into the nicely illuminated parlor that was located on the other side of it. Sure, like the rest of the apartments there was no furniture yet, with the exception of the toilet and the shower. But Sakura was sure the room in which she had just created an impromptu passage would have been a nice parlor. Damn. Missed her. She and her adversary had fought all throughout the floor they were on and this was probably the third bathroom they had smashed. Sakura preferred the one with pale green tiles, it had had a bigger shower, between the Pinkette's blows and the redhead seals and slashing hair. Seriously, who weaponized long hair anyway? As he was running towards the location of his former student, passing on the rooftops, Jiraiya sneezed in the middle of a jump, and almost crashed against the house in front of him. The seal user's movements were difficult to follow, and she made sure to confound Sakura with changes in the tempo of her attacks and throwing the occasional jutsu in the middle. Sakura was also at a disadvantage because she had to hold back her punches to avoid actually having the whole building collapse. Sometimes having a fighting style based on chakra-enhanced strength sucked. It was also clear that the woman's chakra reserves dwarfed hers greatly. Seriously, this woman spammed almost more chakra-consuming jutsu than Naruto. Could it be? No, come on Sakura, don't be a fool, she reprimanded herself. It was clear that she couldn't outlast this enemy. Sakura needed just one good hit to end her, but the red woman also only needed to place a single seal on her, in the right spot, to do who knows what to her. Hopefully just knock her out, if she was lucky. She had to create an opportunity to strike. Sakura feinted to the left, giving a huge opening in her guard to the redhead, who took the bait. She charged the Pinkette and sent an axe kick towards her head. Even better than what Sakura had hoped for. She changed the direction of her attack and turned around, grabbing the fake Kushina's ankle with both her hands before the kick impacted with her. Got you, bitch. She snarled, as she started to use her strength to pull her enemy. Never losing her grip on the older woman's leg, she started to toss her around, smashing her against the wall, leaving large cracks on it, and on the floor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, obliterating the ceramic tiles. Sakura heard some bones in her enemy's body break. She was not surprised. Finally, she let her go after a final spin that sent the redhead sailing towards the breach she'd created earlier in the wall, before tumbling down motionless in the would-be parlor. Fugaku was in pain, practically helpless, but he was a shinobi. He could endure pain. However, the sensation of being helpless was humiliating for the Uchiha. He could feel that he was being dragged somewhere. Had he been rescued? He vaguely remembered Sarutobi attacking the thing that had surrounded him and his enemy. The old monkey surely should have been able to break that thing, right? He opened his eyes, realizing that he could barely do so. His wounds were really life-threatening and he felt like he would fall unconscious at any moment, but even so, Fugaku realized that it was the Uchiha who carried the Manjikyu that was carrying him. Great. Just my luck. I have been captured. He tried to struggle but he was barely able to move. Realizing he was awake, the other Uchiha tightened his grip on him. Don't worry father, we're almost there, said his captor. Father, thought Fugaku in confusion. He had a vague memory of his enemy muttering the word, after stabbing him. Even better, this man was crazy or delusional. He couldn't be his father, the carrier of the Manjikyu was too old. Fugaku already had a son, Itachi, and he was barely 3 years old. He had not lain with a woman who wasn't Mikoto in a long time, since a certain mission before he'd joined the police force, but he had been careful to avoid accidents. His captor didn't look like him at all. He did look a little like Mikoto, strangely. Probably a coincidence, thought Fugaku, closing his tired eyes. Soon he started hearing other sounds, other voices. Yupid blonde skank. What was I thinking, letting her seal away my sword? How do I open this damn thing? Asked a brash voice. It's a standard triple seal, water brain. Just add a little chakra to the 3 seals at the same time. Shouted a female voice. What? Is it really that simple? Asked Water Brain, in disbelief. Duh. It's to keep weapons away from drunken friends, not to seal them forever or something idiotic like that. Friends my ass. That stupid dog tried to drink me in. Karen. Shouted his carrier I need help. Sasuke. What happened? Who's that? Asked the feminine voice again. As Fugaku opened his eyes again, he saw a young woman with bright red hair and red eyes staring at him. Behind her, 2 young men were standing, one with white hair and the other with orange hair. Since the white-haired one was fidgeting with a scroll, Fugaku supposed he was Water Brain. He didn't look too bright so the nickname was fitting. No time to explain, he's dying. Father, quickly, bite my girlfriend. What? The last Uzumaki, at least she thought so, she never had found any other survivors, was sure that at least 2 of her ribs were cracked. Luckily for her, being an Uzumaki and a Jinchuriki at the same time had its advantages. She could feel the pain to her ribs slowly subsiding. Not exactly instant regeneration, but she could manage for a while. Damn it, Uzumaki-san. I told you to not get cocky. Masahiro shouted into Kushina's earpiece. Why was he so agitated? It's not like he was the one who felt like they were being trashed by Tsunade with extreme prejudice. Instead of responding to the radio or getting up, Kushina played possum. She could hear her pink-haired enemy, seriously, pink hair. Was that even natural, walking towards her? Probably to finish her. Kushina kept waiting. She had only one chance, with her injuries. Listen, Uzumaki-san. I don't know what you're planning, but do it quickly. Hokage-sama is fighting a sage. I sent Jiraiya-sama to help him, but, oh, like hell. Kushina would wait if her man was in danger. Completely ignoring whatever else Masahiro was telling her, she shot her chakra chains from her back, aiming blindly in the direction her opponent was coming from, hoping to restrain her long enough to place a nice restraint and gravity seal combo on that big forehead of hers. She grabbed a pair of sealed tags from her equipment pouch as she rolled onto her side to face her target. She was in luck, she had gotten her by the legs. With a single pull of her chakra, the chains dragged the pinkette towards her violently, throwing the girl off balance. Kushina aimed the seal tags at her head, but the girl raised her left arm and they both attached to it under the elbow. Oh well. Good enough, thought Kushina. Fuck, thought Sakura as the seal tags latched onto her arm. She immediately realized that she wasn't able to move her limb anymore, it just fell limp at her side, and it felt like it weighed tons. It was like her own arm was dragging her to the ground. But she could care less about her arm at the moment. She was too occupied with looking in awe at the chain that was entwined around her leg. A chakra chain, like the ones that Karen was able to use. A peculiar jutsu that could only be used by members of the Uzumaki clan. How come Naruto can't use them if he's an Uzumaki? Maybe only the women can? Sakura mused. After all, the only other person that was known for having them was Naruto's mother. Sakura's eyes widened. Why you Kukushi Kushina Uzumaki-san? But that's not possible. Freaked out Sakura. Kushina died 17 years ago, she knew that. And the woman in front of her didn't look like an Edo Tensei. Oh sure. Now you recognize me. Why do all my enemies only remember the chains? You would think that my red hair was enough to make me recognizable, said the Uzumaki woman. Was she pouting? Yes, she was pouting. But this can't be happening. Why are you here? How can you be alive? Was what Sakura really wanted to ask. Kushina looked pointedly at the seemingly hysterical teen. Why are we here? Why wouldn't we attack invaders who just appeared inside the village out of nowhere? That was not the answer Sakura expected. Look, Kushina-san. I don't know what's happening, but this is all a misunderstanding. I'm the Hokage's apprentice and, say what? Exploded the redhead, her hair dancing menacingly above her head. Listen here, you little pink strumpet, my soon-to-be husband only has one student left, and you're not it. Databane. She screamed the last word, already in motion as she charged the stunned pink-haired girl. What did you call me? Whispered Sakura, frowning as she gripped the chakra chain with her good arm. When Kushina was almost on her, she swung the chain with all her strength. Once again, Kushina was sent flying across the room. The chakra chain's grip on Sakura's leg loosened and she scrambled away. The seals on her left arm were really impeding her movements. Even with her strength, she was forced to stay crouched because of the arm's increased weight. Her arm was busted and it was getting in her way. Forming a one-handed seal, Sakura wanted to grin as Kushina's eyes bulged out when the older woman saw the een seal appearing on her forehead and expanding across her face. Too bad she couldn't afford any distractions from this. Stop the blood flow. Numb the pain receptors. Create a chakra scalpel. I'm not a strumpet, declared the medic Nin. With a single, decisive motion of the chakra scalpel, Sakura cut cleanly through the skin, muscle tissue, and bone of her left arm just below the elbow. Her amputated, seal-covered arm tumbled to the wooden floor, which cracked and splintered under the pressure of its augmented weight. I am a kunoichi. She declared proudly. As she rose, she started to regenerate her limb with the technique passed down to her by the Godame Hokage. I am a kunoichi. Declared the pink-haired girl in front of her. Kushina couldn't believe to her eyes. She had seen the seal that formed on her adversary only once before, on the forehead of one of the Sannin, Tsunade Senju, who hadn't taught it to anyone, at least not to Kushina's knowledge. But here it was, on the face of this pink kunoichi she was sure nobody had even heard of. The slug princess was going to have some explaining to do the next time Kushina saw her. That wasn't all. The limb on floor was staining the tiles with the blood that was flooding from it, but not even a drop was dripping from her stump. Just how good was Pinky's chakra control? To be able to stop her blood flow like that. Pinky rose to her feet, and Kushina was able to see clearly that her missing forearm was regenerating. It was like watching a plant grow in fast motion, but with bones, tissues, nerves and skin. That expanded Yin seal, her chakra control, her enemy knew the creation rebirth. Which meant that she was practically unkillable as long as she had chakra in her body. Next time she saw Tsunade, Kushina was going to kick her big, old fat ass. The Uzumaki woman launched herself towards Pinky, instead of waiting for the completion of the process. She was more vulnerable while she was short a limb, and she knew it. Instead of clashing with Kushina, the pink-haired kunoichi rolled away, escaping the fight to gain more time to complete her regeneration. It was only a matter of seconds now. More chains sprouted from Kushina's body and launched themselves towards her target, moving like whips. She just kept evading them. There was not much time left. Kushina sent her chains spiraling around her opponent, trapping her in a circle of chains that was whirling all around her, from the floor to the ceiling. Then she started to tighten them, reducing the circle's radius. The pinkette looked around, searching for a way out. Escape was impossible. Their eyes met, and Kushina was sure that victory was hers. Then Pinky smirked. With her good hand, the Tsunade wannabe punched the floor she was standing on, breaking it and falling down to the lower floor just as the ring of chains closed in on the place she had been standing. Kushina gaped. Sneaky little. The parquet behind her exploded as Pinky erupted from it. Turning around, Kushina froze in shock. The younger woman's arm was completely reformed, but that was not what had captured the redhead's attention. The markings of her seal were now covering not only her face, but had descended down past her neck and covered the rest of her body. Kushina had only seen this one time in her life, when Jiraiya had been hiding behind her, crying like a baby, after having pissed off Tsunade more than usual. The strength of 100. This failure of an infiltrator was able to fully release the Yin seal, and use the strength of 100. Forget about kicking Tsunade's ass. Kushina was going to strangle that hopeless gambler with her chakra chains. Kushina didn't see the punch that hit her. But she surely felt it as she roared towards the wall on the other side of the ruined room. Then she felt the impact with the concrete. For a split of a second, Kushina could feel her consciousness slipping away, but she forced herself to open her eyes. Pinky was rocketing towards her, readying a punch with her new left arm and screaming a battle cry. Desperately, Kushina created the greatest number of chains she could conjure up with her chakra, filling the room with pale, glowing metal interlocking rings. The mini Tsunade was trapped in the middle of it, just a few feet away from her. She was still pushing, shaking and struggling, but the chains were too strong, even for her with her strength. It took a few moments for Kushina to get up. Her whole body was screaming in pain. She had underestimated her adversary and she had paid for it. Hopefully she would feel better after a few days of healing, Jinchuriki style. As she finally stood on her feet, Kushina heard a crack. Snapping her head to the direction of the sound, she widened her eyes in awe once again. Since the beginning of this fight, her chains were cracking. Slowly, but surely, the pinkette was freeing herself from the chakra chains that were trapping her, with sheer strength. Pinky started to scream defiantly as she pulled all the chains she could at once. One of the glowing links broke. Kushina forgot the pain in a rush of adrenaline and ran towards her still immobilized opponent. Her hand darted into her equipment pouch, taking out of it seal tags, ink and brush. Time to put an end to this. Moving, circling and almost dancing around her enemy, she started applying sealed tags like there was no tomorrow, or even drawing new ones, her chains following her all the time. Pinky could only snarl and try to hit her with limbs too hindered to move properly. Gravity and paralysis seal combo on arms and legs, to stop her. Chakra disruptor and suppressor seal combo on her nape, vertebral column and the pelvis, to take her chakra away. Paralysis and sensory deprivation combo on her forehead, right on the location of the brain, to leave her literally as a vegetable, unable to see, hear, smell or feel anything as long as the seal was in place. When she finished, her adversary lying safely still on the floor, Kushina landed on her butt and dismissed her chains. This fight had taken more from her than she had expected. "Damn, girl," she said, talking to her opponent who wasn't in any condition to respond. "Who are you?" The blank expression and the drool that was leaving Pinky's mouth was the only reply she received. "Maybe I overdid it a little," mumbled Kushina. She just remained there, sitting in the room that had turned into a war zone, before perking up. "Ah, shit. Minato." In his long career as a shinobi, and Hokage, Hiruzen had seen a lot of strange and bizarre sights. The one in front of him didn't even make it into his personal top 20. It still baffled him, however. He and Orochimaru had followed the raven-haired boy that had used that strange chakra construct inside the heavily damaged building after he took Fugaku away. That was something he didn't understand entirely. The enemy had gravely wounded the Uchiha leader, maybe even struck a mortal wound, and his defensive construct was just impervious to any of his and his students' attack. It shook them off like it was nothing. During the chase, he had suspected that the enemy had wanted to take Fugaku as a hostage. So he was expecting a great resistance, an attempt from the invaders to secure their captive. He wasn't expecting to find 4 teenagers in a room, arguing among themselves, with an unconscious but otherwise fine Fugaku resting against a wall. How had they healed him so quickly? Maybe one of them had training as a medic nin, there was no other explanation. And they were ignoring both him and Orochimaru. "Why can't I open this stupid scroll?" shouted the white-haired one. "Because you're an idiot, that's why. Even a rookie genin would be able to do it." A red-haired girl who was adjusting her shirt snapped at him. The other two, the one they'd chased down and a tall youngster with orange hair, finally noticed them but didn't make any move to engage. The one with the scroll in his hands and the girl kept squabbling for a few moments until they too noted the other 2 shinobi in the room. Hiruzen saw how the group sent strange glares towards Orochimaru. Surprise, mixed with curiosity and, "Hey snake face. What's the deal with the headband? Since when did you come back to Konoha? And wasn't the old geezer dead?" asked the white-haired one, arching a thin, almost not-existent eyebrow. "All right. That was strange enough. Entered into his top 20, at the last place. Who could even think about Orochimaru leaving Konoha? Or about his death? He was old, but not that old." Beside him, his student was examining the 4 youngsters in front of them with a calculative look, but the former Hokage could tell that he was taken aback by that question. Who wouldn't be? Maybe that was the reason, they were trying to confound them. "Suigetsu," spoke the kidnapper. "Shut up." The black-haired young man made a single step towards them before stopping, an Anbu blade in his hand. Hiruzen readied Enma, still in his staff form, and Orochimaru started to circle the teens to attack them from another direction. "We surrender," said the enemy in a neutral tone, letting his sword fall to the ground. Hiruzen wasn't expecting that, but maintained a perfect poker face. "We do what?" questioned the one called Suigetsu, shock evident in his face. "I said," repeated the raven boy, "that we surrender, Suigetsu." The redhead jumped ahead, beside the apparent leader of the group. The two started a short, but intense eye contest. It was quite obvious for Sarutobi that these two were lovers. Their whole body language had changed when they'd met each other's eyes. "All right, I agree. We surrender," the redhead finally conceded. Hiruzen wondered how the relationship between them worked. "I didn't agree to nothing," the white-haired Suigetsu started to argue before being silenced by a punch from the only female in the room that made his head explode. "Into water? Like hell you don't!" screamed the girl as Suigetsu's missing head started to reform from the water that had been splattered everywhere. That was going in Hiruzen's top 10. Not something you saw every day. "Ugh, Hokage-sama, why didn't you take one of our radios before barging into the building? It's not like we don't have spares," thought Masahiro as he switched channels once again to inform another team about the situation. Almost all the intruders had been rendered inoffensive or had surrendered. If they could stop the sage that was fighting against Hokage-sama and the sand guy, maybe the village would still be standing by noon. Minato grunted, getting up with a backflip. After the 2 Rasengan had collided, he and his adversary had been locked for a few minutes in a strange contest. Like arm wrestling, but with a pair of spiraling spheres of chakra, created to tear and grind anything they touched instead of arms. Minato was surprised to still have all the fingers attached to his hand. When the 2 jutsu had reached the breaking point, they'd exploded, sending them in opposite directions. And since they'd been attached to the ceiling at the time, they'd also fallen down to the ruined wooden floor. His look-alike was rising in a less athletic way, slowly. "Alright, you may have copied my jutsu," started the fake Minato. "I'm sorry." "Me, copying your jutsu?" questioned Minato, outraged. He had created the Rasengan, it was his own invention. How could this copycat accuse him of imitating someone? "Yeah, well, I'm not forgiving you even if you say you're sorry," mumbled the teen, who looked as offended, if not more, than Minato. "But if you were able to copy my Rasengan," continued the younger blonde, his frown morphing into a full grin, "why don't you try to copy this?" As he said that, Minato saw that his eyes change. They became yellow in color, with bar-like pupils, and the area around them was colored orange. "Oh, crap." Minato blinked in surprise, and his enemy was immediately in front of him, throwing a punch. The fist didn't connect with Minato, but something did, and the Hokage found himself slamming into the wall. "Not bad, huh? Try to copy it. Good luck without Sage Mode," boasted his attacker. Rasengan. Sage Mode. Frog Kata. "Jiraiya-sensei, if I survive this fight I'm going to have a nice chat with you." "Wait, I got it," shouted the imposter as he created a clone. "Why don't you try to copy this?" The younger blonde started to form a Rasengan in his hand, with the assistance of his clone. Under Minato's shocked eyes, the spiraling sphere changed form, and 4 blades of chakra came to life, humming from the sheer power in them. "No way," thought Minato, disbelieving what he was seeing. "He completed it. I was never able to do it, and I tried for years. Who is this kid?" Naruto raised his arm, letting the Rasen Shuriken spin above his head. As soon as the clone he had sent into another room had finished gathering natural energy, it had dispersed himself, transferring not only his memories to Naruto, but also all the necessary energy for entering Sage Mode. He let the Rasen Shuriken spin even faster, grinning like a maniac. He wasn't actually planning to use it, he just wanted to scare the guy that was posing as his father. But he had to admit, the imposter was doing a great job of it. How did he know the mechanics of the Rasengan? After all, Naruto had taught it only to Konohamaru, and he doubted that his friend part-time apprentice, part-time self-proclaimed rival would just teach it to the first person who asked. Well, the one behind the attack was able to recreate the Sharingan. Why not recreating a jutsu, reasoned Naruto in his head. Still, it pissed him off all the more. The blonde was at the point of intimidating a surrender from the man, when he noticed something that he had ignored during the first seconds since he'd entered the Sage Mode. Among the other advantages of being able to enter such a state, there was also an incredible boost in the ability of sensing chakra signatures. He could sense all the people in the village. He sensed all his friends in the building, either unconscious or captured, with the exception of Gaara. Sasuke had allowed himself to be captured, thought Naruto, surprised. I'm so going to rub it in his face, later. The chakra signature beside the team's was strangely familiar, but he couldn't really place it. Now that he thought about it, even this fake Yondaime and other people inside the building, had a chakra signature similar to one he'd felt in the past. Who were they, though? Stupid hangover. You would think that Sage Mode would fix that, he moaned to himself. When he examined the village with his senses, he realized that he couldn't feel Tsunade-chan's presence. Or Shizun's. Or that of so many people. The only way Naruto wouldn't be able to sense them would be because. No, he thought, as his eyes gained a little moisture. He met the man's eyes with a furious glare. Losing them like this, after they'd survived the war. Screw surrender. You killed them all, you're going to pay. It was then that he felt it. The chakra signature of someone who had spent almost 3 years with him, every day. Teaching him, guiding him and helping him become a better shinobi and a better person. But that person was dead, wasn't he? Then why was he able to feel his signature? Arrow, Sennin. He whispered, tilting his head in confusion towards the direction he felt the man's presence. He was so focused on it, that he forgot to check his surroundings. When something wrapped around his raised arm, he was so surprised that he left Sage Mode and lost control of the Rasen Shuriken. When Kushina finally arrived at the floor that Masahiro had told her, she just followed the sound of battle. Arriving there had been a pain, literally, but she was too stubborn. When she entered the most destroyed room she had ever seen, and she had survived the destruction of her village and a shinobi war, she saw Minato at the mercy of an enemy. She didn't care about all the details that she would remember later, after the fight. The only thing she noticed was an enemy that was preparing to use an obviously destructive technique on her future husband. She acted on instinct. She threw a chakra chain around the enemy's raised arm and pulled it away. Whatever the chakra thing was, it skyrocketed away, tearing through the already damaged wall and part of the ceiling, pulverizing it. Half of the room was now receiving sunlight from a large gap in the roof, and whatever it was still soaring through the air. Just what the hell was that jutsu? Then the strange projectile exploded above the village. For a second, Kushina was blinded. Kushina had saved him at the last minute. Minato made a mental note to take her to dinner to a nice place. If they both lived through this enemy was powerful, really powerful. Capture was not an option anymore. Using the distraction Kushina had provided, Minato threw one of his special kunai at his opponent and teleported to it as it passed above the younger blonde's shoulder. Minato spun in midair, aiming for a strike to the neck. As the blade was about to hit its target, Minato's hand and kunai were covered by a thick layer of sand. No way. He showed up, thought Masahiro, now we have to deal with both of them. As Naruto wondered what was trapping his arm, it was difficult to see because of the angle his arm was twisted. Something blunt hit Naruto's neck, and he cried out in pain. Hey, watch it, asshole. He stopped when he saw the sand coating the blade that would have killed him otherwise. Then he saw Gaara standing at the entrance of the room, his sand floating around him defensively. I had everything under control, mumbled Naruto, pouting. I'm sure you did, responded the expressionless Kazekage. Naruto was actually glad for the last-minute save. He just didn't want to admit it. It was one of those among friends things. You free my blonde, I'll free yours, said the redhead Suna shinobi to someone Naruto couldn't see, presumably the one that had captured his arm. Apparently his captor was hesitating because Gaara started to grip his fist, causing the pressure of the sand around the hand of Naruto's attacker to tighten. Naruto felt whatever had ensnared his arm starting to squeeze it. The confrontation went on for a few more moments, until both the blondes emitted, almost at the same time, a grunt of pain. Naruto felt the pressure on his arm stopping. With a quick motion, Gaara sent his sand around him, and moved the fellow Jinchuriki beside him. It was then that Naruto saw her. What? He screamed, they made an imposter of you, too. I'm not an imposter, stupid Minato wannabe, Databane. His mother's perfect copy shouted. She even had the verbal tick, incredible. They're not imposters, Gaara said, without glancing away from the other blonde and redhead pair. Thank you. Snapped Kushina, pouting. What? Asked Naruto, confused. They're not imposters, they're real, repeated Gaara, being more specific for Naruto's sake. Hearing that, Naruto examined their opponents warily. They seemed to be on guard, waiting for their move. Real? What did Gaara mean by real? Gaara, they don't look like an Edo Tensei at all. Because they're not an Edo Tensei, Naruto, Gaara stated. The Minato copy whispered something to Kushina copy, who whispered back. Gaara. Just tell me what's going on. Look to your left, responded his friend. I see only a giant hole in my wall. And the ceiling. And the roof, grumbled the annoyed blonde. Not the wall. The Hokage monument, Gaara persisted. The monument? Why should I look at the? Naruto blinked. He closed his eyes. He opened them again. He tried to dispel the genjutsu that was clearly placed on him. No such luck. There are only, he whispered in disbelief. Yes. How is that possible? I hoped you could explain that, said Gaara, meeting Naruto's eyes for the first time since the beginning of the conversation. Why would I? Naruto's indignant scream was interrupted when a tall figure darted inside the room, landing between the two pairs of shinobi, that immediately tensed, ready to fight. As the figure landed, it started a kabuki dance that Naruto knew too well. I am the hermit from Mount Myaboku. I am the great Jiraiya, the toad sage. Finished the gallant Jiraiya as he assumed his fabulous position, his arm extended in front of him. Everybody paused. Gaara was shocked, having never been exposed to his danced introduction. Minato and Kushina seemed relieved at seeing the self-proclaimed super pervert, because now they had the upper hand against the two enemies. Naruto, instead, had started hyperventilating. Between the hangover of epic proportions, the fight against his dad's doppelganger, the shock from not sensing Bachan and all the people that were missing in the village, his mom's doppelganger, the exhaustion that followed the release of Sage Mode, the crazy Hokage monument that was not a genjutsu and the living, breathing, Arrow Sennin in front of him, Naruto had reached his breaking point. He fainted. /N, well, I hope this chapter was worth the wait, since it was a pain to write. Really? It was. I got stuck on some scenes for hours, sometimes even a day. So, please, review and let me know what you think of every single fight I described. In the next chapter, the plot will move on. Now, what about a nice story recommendation? I would like to recommend to you Not Sick, of Serendipity. In this story, Itachi was not sick when he fought against Sasuke. Saying more would be a spoiler. It's written beautifully, the characterization hits the spot and it has very long chapters. Now, here's a little omake written for me by my beta, Pyrothtenka, when I was stuck writing a scene. Basically, the Naruto of her story falls in the middle of Kushina and Sakura's fight. Warning. Sheer crack. Naruto let out a grunt as he fell mysteriously through the random hole that had torn open suddenly at his feet. Plot device, Mr. Frodo, plot device. Where had that come from? He'd barely had enough time to register the mostly demolished decor of the room before he landed on something remarkably person-like that even let out a grunt of surprise. To complete the image. It wasn't until he opened his eyes to find that it was, in fact, a person. A very familiar, very angry, and very scary person. Ah! Mom! I didn't do it. I swear. He had no idea what he was claiming to have not done, but he was sure there was something that needed it. What is this? Mom. If this is your idea of a genjutsu, Pinky, it's not gonna work. I have no son, Databane. Naruto gasped, and Mom. Naruto. The blonde looked up at the somewhat familiar voice and stared in shock at the almost adult Sakura standing just a bit aways. Sakura-chan. Now he was just confused. What Ash? You're gonna pay for making me see the child Minato and I could never have. Die. The redhead launched herself at Naruto's Kunoichi teammate, ignoring him entirely as she focused on trying to place more seals on the girl. Sakura. Naruto called out, forming his trademark cross seal and summoning some clones. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He didn't know what was going on, but he wasn't about to let his mom kill his crush. Even if said crush looked old enough to be his babysitter. All but 2 of the dozen clones he summoned charged forward. One of those 2 launched themselves at him and wrapped him in a tight hug. Naruto, don't listen to that imposter. You are my son and mommy loves you. She's an evil clone. I thought you were the evil clone. The other Bunshin spoke up with a grin. Shut up, Namikaze. Mom. But you, Naruto sputtered as he whipped his head back and forth between the clone and the woman attacking Sakura. The clone pat his head reassuringly. Don't worry. Mommy will take care of this. It released him and pointed accusingly at the redhead. Hey. Fake me. You better be ready, because Uzumaki Kushina won't be defeated by some cheap imitation. The 2 Kunoichi stopped what they were doing to stare at the Naruto Bunshin like it was crazy. The other clone leaned into stage whisper, PSSST, Kushina. What is it, Minato? I'm busy. You're a boy. There was a pause while his wife digested that information, then let out a string of profanities that made the yondaime quickly cover his son's ears. Damn it all, henge. In a puff of smoke, the child form was replaced by that of a red-headed demon of fury. Any sane person would have fled from such a sight, but fortunately, no shinobi ever claimed to be sane. The other Kushina was not impressed. Ha! Cheap imitation. You're a henged Kage Bunshin. Still, you're claiming to be me so. I'm going to have to kill you now. Naruto, seal, clone Kushina barked, and the boy quickly slapped the pre-prepared paper tag on her that enhanced her durability. So she wouldn't burst into a cloud of chakra smoke at the first hit. Bring it on, poser. While the 2 redheads clashed, older Sakura came over to join Naruto and his strange clone. Do you have any idea what's going on? Not a clue, the boy replied. Minato, using his crazy super genius prodigy powers of deduction, replied, oh, we're in the past where your crazy older self managed to get drunk at a party and someone made the mistake of leaving ink in his reach and now he and his friends are stuck. Here in the past is going crazy trying to figure out what's going on. What? It's not important. The 3 watched in various degrees of bemusement as the 2 redheads got into a giant fight with seals and chakra chains that ended with the 2 of them hopelessly stuck together. Then they all talked it out. Had a party. And ate cake. The end. That's it for part 2. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.